Coming up on UGTV, Standing Committee Meetings of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas. A meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. This will be followed by a meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee.
All right, we will get started. Good afternoon, everyone. We'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. You'll be asked to please come forward to the microphone on the podium and be recognized, and you'll have 3 minutes to make your comments at that time. We do ask that for accurate recording and broadcast purposes, that everyone present please speak as directly as possible into a microphone. Before we actually get to the agenda tonight, I want to point out that Commissioner Bynum has joined us this evening. Commissioner Murguia was unable to join us this evening due to another obligation, and Commissioner Bynum has graciously agreed to sit in her place on this committee. Could we have roll call, please?
Roll call. Walters?
Here.
Murguia? We have Commissioner Bynum for Murguia. Townsend?
Here.
Burrows? Here. McKiernan?
Here. We did have one revision to our originally published agenda, and that was the addition of some additional documentation about land bank policy changes that I do believe was emailed out to everybody. So that's the only revision from the agenda as originally published. Our first item of business is to approve the minutes of our committee meeting of April 29th, 2019.
Move for approval.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve as submitted. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Those minutes are approved as submitted. That takes us to our committee agenda. We have 4 items on our committee agenda. I'm going to turn the item number 1, a policy update, over to Chris Slaughter and Catherine Carter.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. The first item, the policy, is tonight only going to be for information only. And then hopefully, if all goes well or with some good comments, we will be bringing it back very soon for final approval. So with that, we'll go ahead and get right into the highlights of the changes. So first, we want to give some thanks to some of the individuals and groups that helped during this process. The newly formed land asset management team has been very instrumental in kind of keeping us on path with what we're trying to do as it relates to SOAR and some of the other unified government goals. Catherine and the Economic Development Department, the County Administrator's Office has been very helpful, and also really want to thank the Advisory Board. We had a nice meeting with some of the members this past week that was very, very constructive, and want to just give them some special thanks. You know, we've talked about this before, but the main purpose is taking those problem properties and getting them back to productive use, whether it's rehabbing a house, whether it's new development, and sometimes even if it's demoing a nuisance. So that's really the striving or the main focus of some of these changes, and keeping the land bank as a whole moving forward for bigger and better things. And one of the things that we'll stress throughout this, and as you read it, you'll see that really the three main points that are kind of where we're trying to take the land bank to is to really be a strategic partner to not only the unified government, but Bonner Springs, Edwardsville, the Board of Public Utilities. And we want us to start focusing on these assets or these properties we have as development assets. And of course, I think any department will sit there and say, as long as we can streamline and be transparent and really help our customers achieve what their ultimate goal is, that's our number one goal. So some of the sections that we're going to highlight here tonight in just the presentation, and then we can open it up to questions and comments. Holds. This has been something that we've had plenty of conversations over the years about. So with the policy change, when it goes into effect, we will basically no longer be offering holds for strategic areas. One of the things, and we'll talk about it here in a little bit further, is we want to start offering options. So we feel this will get people that are serious about developing in our community ready to go at the start of our process, and once the land's conveyed, then we're hopefully putting them in a position that they're going to get going and really doing what they're promising for the community. A lot of this will just be, a lot of the property that some people may consider hold may be stuff that we have, we're holding in reserve for, say, the unified government or any other local governments. Let's say a large public works project. That land bank property in there is going to be very vital to the success of those projects. Any other new development, whether it's UG-led or other government agencies-led, we really want to make sure that we're being a partner with them for their success. So the options agreements would be a one-year agreement. There would be a fee for that. It would be non-refundable. So if anybody wants to come and build a single-family house, we're going to tell them it's $100 for the option. Residential would be $500. And really what to do is it gives them an opportunity as they go through some of their approval processes to give them a way that they can stake ownership in the property. It can help them go back to their investors and say, we have a serious agreement with the local authorities that are turning around and pretty much saying, as long as we're ready to go, the land will be there for us. They will, as I know is a big sticking point in a lot of the past hold agreements, we will require that maintenance of the property is their responsibility. And just like with any other development agreement, if things come up or I don't want to say take a turn for the worse, but if the unified government, if land bank economic development really feels that maybe this is not the right project, we'll have language in there that we can serve them notice and in the agreement. So now we're going to talk about sales. And really, and this is another thing we'll talk about here in a minute, the categorization of what's buildable and what's not buildable. And if we're looking at our assets as developable assets, a large quantity of our inventory is going to be considered buildable. So really, I think the things that we want to start coming to you with a straight sale, get it off our books, is if a lot is non-buildable. If it's in a location that we feel, our recommendation is there may not be any immediate investment for quite some time. The agreement will generally follow the option agreement. It's been based on a lot of the larger scale development agreements that you guys have seen before, but some of our projects may not be that scale, so we kind of tuned it down a little bit. And the other thing is just in our rehab program, when we start that process, we have our rehabber sign a quitclaim deed. We don't file it, we lock it away. But in case after serving notice, we can't reach that person, we have a mechanism to get the property back in our control. So we would probably craft something very similar to that in a development, or I'm sorry, in a sales agreement. We've talked about lease, but we wanted to just bring that up again because that is one of the newer improvements to the policy. This will be a non-improved lease. Individual gardens are fine, benches, swing sets, stuff like that is fine. It would be for 2 years, and we would have to give 90 days' notice. That is a change in the policy before you, that if we felt there was a development in that area that we wanted to pursue, that would be the time limit of notice. That still gives people plenty of time to finish any kind of crops or harvest anything that they've been working on. We always will work with the individuals that we're doing, but 90 days we feel gives us a large enough window to give them enough time. If a project starts out as, if a request starts out a lease and it maybe eventually builds into development, we feel that this is a great way for them to also control the property, maybe not going through the option part. Until they build some momentum, we may steer them to the option at that point, but it's a way that they can get control of the property that we would later not offer for another development or for an individual to lease. And of course, they'd have to maintain the property. Yard extension, some of the changes we're requesting is that the owner of the yard extension not only must own the property next to the yard extension, they have to reside there. And if it's non-buildable, then again, we're back to the sales standpoint. And then if it's buildable, some of the teams that we've talked about in the past, the advisory board, of course, and the staff advisory team, this information would be provided to them with the recommendation brought before you guys. So here we're basically what we've come up with so far as our non-buildable definition, and this would be anything less than 2,000 square feet. Currently in our inventory, we only have about 65 of those properties. Something that maybe is in a floodplain, it's landlocked, meaning that there's no other applicant-owned land or any land bank or UG land, so it'd be kind of tough for them to get access to it. Any kind of right-of-way would be non-buildable. We have some undermined property, and there's going to be some with some topography issues that just make development not really feasible. Community gardens. When we look at community gardens, we must think of larger tracts of land or multiple in a ideal location for this. But we're going to ask that they have some sort of partnership supported by the neighborhood group in that area, and we're also going to ask them to have livable neighborhoods be involved. We would really like to see an affiliation with a larger growing group. We put a couple examples up there: Giving Grove, Cultivate KC. And then we're just going to ask that they work with us, that if it's going to be a community garden based on the master plans and some of the recommendations through there, that it's something that's truly going to just benefit the whole neighborhood and community.
So one of the things that we did, so the original document that with the track changes that was uploaded was about a week and a half ago. And then early last week, we met with the Land Bank Advisory Committee, had a really productive meeting with them. And so wanted to make sure that we kind of highlight some of the changes that are now in the document in front of you. I think Chris highlighted those in your policy with yellow, so you can kind of see where the new items are. But some of the things, just to kind of bring them out here, we clarified the role of the Land Bank Advisory Board. That was a little kind of nebulous as it was in the current document. Also changed it so it had just said prior that it would be eight members from the Livable Neighborhood Task Force. Now we're going to have each of the NBRs will have a member, as well as 2 members from the task force. So we think that way we'll really have good representation from across the city. Additionally, kind of also clarify the recommendation and approval process. One of the things that we really want to do is make sure that by the time a project comes in front of you all, that you can very easily see what was the staff recommendation, what was the advisory board recommendation. We're hoping that having gone through both of those kind of reviews prior to it coming to you, you'll have a much kind of clearer sense of what some of the issues may be, or some of the benefits, depending on the project. We also are going to be working on kind of a flow chart because we recognize that this is complicated and trying to make it, I think it's easier than it may appear in a 30-page document. But so one of the things that we'll try to do to not only assist you all, but also the public is kind of have a nice flow chart of, okay, if this, then here, and make that process much more clear. Also, one of the things that we discussed with the advisory board was having some kind of consultation with livable neighborhoods. So any project that goes through, we'll just ask them, have you talked to livable neighborhoods? Depending on the project, that could get bumped up to, presenting at a neighborhood meeting or kind of case by case, but we felt, and the livable neighborhood staff felt, that that was probably the best way to make sure, again, that we're getting as much representation, knowing that these are, UG assets. This is not just any old piece of property that someone is purchasing to build a house. This is a piece of property that the unified government owns, and so we want to make sure that we're just doing our due diligence while also not slowing down the process. And then the final item was something that Commissioner Walters had mentioned at the last couple meetings and thought that it made sense to add into the policy. So we basically have stated that you cannot have a property transfer into and out of the land bank in the same approval cycle. So that means you'll have to, if the property is transferred in, then you'll have an entire month plus for, if people are interested in acquiring that property, to go through that process for the next cycle.
So we'll turn it over to you guys. We'll turn it over to you guys for any questions or comments.
So one thing that I just want to clarify is that the copy of this that we got that's redlined and strikeout that has some yellow highlights, that is the most recent copy of this?
Yes.
Okay. Because that seems to be consistent, especially with the with your discussion about the Land Bank Advisory Board and its restated role in this process. Does any other member of the committee have any questions or discussion? Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Ms. Carter and Mr. Slaughter. My questions are predicated on the first version of this, and I understand these updates are not for action tonight, so I may have some later that I'll get to you with the redlined and yellow highlighted version. But that notwithstanding, just wanted to ask a few questions about some of the proposed highlights for clarification. With regard to holds, we said abolish all holds effective upon approval. We just went forward several months ago with a hold predicated on future development hopes for a certain corridor in the northeast area. So with these changes, does that mean that the unified government will no longer be making hold recommendations, or what are we saying here?
Perhaps abolish was probably the wrong word for the presentation. We'll still honor anything that's still existing. But I think going forward, when we're approached for, say, a 4 square block area of all land bank property, I think what we'll do is we'll say you can get an option on that property when you feel you're to the point where your product's ready to go, versus kind of keeping an open-ended window until this is my idea, which I think a lot of some of the past holds brought before you have kind of been, and then they never came to fruition, or they just maybe just didn't develop the speed that all of us hoped they would. But anything currently on the books, we would still honor.
Okay.
That being said, the northeast hold is set to expire September something. So our hope is that this policy will be hopefully in place and approved by the time, prior to the planned expiration of that hold. So we'll
Yeah,
have
I apologize for misunderstanding your question. I I believe the 120 days ends on September 6th or 7th, and I believe it's September 8th would be that month's scheduled standing committee. So initially, that's kind of why our goal was to bring it to you now, so we can really get ahead of this and then be ready to be in a situation to address that when we really felt confident that this was going to move forward.
Okay, thank you. And I didn't think that this proposal would invalidate any current holds. What I'm really asking is, because there are other plans afoot to do a similar type of Northeast planning in other parts of the city. So by making this proposed change, or proposing this change, are we saying by that whatever may come out of other future plans development, the unified government will not institute holds for future development plans for our purposes?
I think we're hoping that by making these policy changes, a future hold like that will not be necessary, because we have already, I mean, the reason for the hold in the Northeast was due to potential speculation and some other things that with the new policy, we're hoping that that will be enough, and, you know, we'll see how it all works when we start, you know, actually utilizing it. But the hope is that that would not be needed in the future. That being said, you know, I think that's always something that if a situation, you know, with the area plan comes up and we want to make sure that we're in a good position, that's, you know, that's always a function that we can utilize.
So we're saying that because speculation could be an issue, not only with the Northeast area,
Right.
but other areas where future development or expansion looks right or
Yeah.
possible.
And so the hope is that the policy will be such that we're knocking out speculation for the entire city when it comes, or the entire county when it comes to land bank properties.
Okay. Going to the options section, hearing your presentation today, this might answer my question. At this point with the options, title to any of these properties is not passing from the UG at this
Correct.
point, under the option, okay.
Yeah, really an option, and what we've been trying to do is model how the land bank works with kind of more similarly with how traditional development works, so that this gives people a piece of paper that says that, you know, they have kind of if not ownership of it, they have control of that property. And then that will allow them to work through their financing, potentially go through the planning process here without, you know, having to see how they can, gives them about a year to kind of figure out some of those things prior to actually taking hold of the property.
Okay, thank you. All right, with the lease sections, and you've mentioned this maintenance of the lot is the leaseholder's responsibility during the term of the lease. Within the lease, are we putting in a lease term that says that within the lease? Okay. And also within the lease, do we address whether or not failure to perform upgrades or upkeep can be cause for termination of the lease? If we don't, I think that would be something beneficial to add, because if they're supposed to keep it up, if the leaseholder is supposed to and doesn't, then, you know, what do we do? So if we don't have that in there, I'd like to see, let's look at that.
I think we do cover
do.
that, but I'll check with legal and make sure that that's indicated.
Okay, thank you. Those are the questions I had from my review.
Commissioner Bynum.
Thank you, I appreciate it. First of all, thanks to Chris Slaughter and Catherine Carter for continuing to work on the policy, especially the work that you did with the community. I really appreciate it. You think that the policy will come back to this committee, not in August, but September? Okay.
We would hope in August.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
it could
if we
come back
can-
next month.
Based
Yeah.
on conversation tonight, yes, I think unless there's changes to made, we'll be presenting it next month.
Okay, so while I realize that it's a committee level vote first, it would seem prudent to email the revised policy to the full commission. I noticed that on the document that came, it was this committee plus me as a substitute tonight. So I just think that might be helpful. Just a comment, right as you start, right above section 1.1, it strikes me that as we begin a document, the first thing we should be talking about is the purpose. And you've got that clear over in section 2, and it's just a comment, nothing more. But it sure seems like the purpose of the whole thing could be right up front for everybody to understand, with maybe definitions and a little paragraph on background, just a comment. So as far as the process, then your land bank manager is going to take the application, review it, vet it. The advisory board will also look, you tell me, the kind of steps of the process.
I guess the simplest version is, yes, staff will review. Then we plan on meeting with the staff advisory team first, get their comment. If their comments satisfactory to move forward, then that's when we would bring in the advisory board.
Okay.
And then we're kicking around the idea of some sort of report that would put together, and that would be what would be in your agenda packet for the standing committee level and then the board of trustee level.
And that would include the comments from advisory board members as well as the staff committee.
Correct.
Okay, and it would come to this committee for review.
Eventually, the whole commission would see that report, yes.
So I have to ask you, do you have the staff you need in this department to do that in an efficient manner? Because it's budget time, and you're proposing something that I'm not looking to set you up to fail. There's been a lot of work done around the land bank, the various iterations we've seen with land bank holds, and now multiple revisions of a policy, and there's no point in setting you up for failure. We need to know, if not tonight, we need to know, do you have what you need in your office to be efficient and effective at doing what's outlined? So you don't need to feel compelled to answer tonight unless you're ready.
I mean, I will just say, I appreciate that a lot. I think we are always, we have enough work right now that we are basically always looking for additional staff. And I think Chris can attest to the fact that he's told me many, many times that in the past 10 years he's been working on the land bank, he's actually had more inquiries about development, particularly single-family, building single-family homes than he has in all the other 10 years. And I don't see that slowing.
I don't either. That's a fair enough answer. Section 2.4, where you talk about qualified applicants and offers, demonstrate prior consultation with livable neighborhoods. Have you talked with them about what that consultation would look like in terms of, is there going to be a form developed, an intake form developed, or some document that's going to ride with the rest of the application?
I think we've met with livable neighborhoods, and this is one of the things that they really pushed and thought would be a good idea. What we anticipate is when someone comes in inquiring about a particular lot, then the first thing we would say, okay, here's the application, here's the process. Kind of before you do anything, give livable neighborhoods a call. And then from that point, we're not wanting to micromanage that process, but we're anticipating that would be, depending on what the what the project was, that would, the folks at livable neighborhoods would determine kind of what level of kind of scrutiny from the rest of the neighborhood was required, and then they would let us know that yes, that person did contact us, and then we'd feel free to move forward.
Seems like checking a box or again, something that
Yeah,
documents that.
we envision that being part of the vetting process we would have. Now, whether that would be a memo or just email correspondence, I don't think we've ironed that out yet. But, we can definitely look at some sort of sign-off thing. But I think what we're envisioning is when they come to us, before we would accept that application, we're going to strongly suggest that that really kind of be their step one and go out and start that or engage with them.
All I'm saying is, if it's going to be in a policy, it should have a standard practice associated with it. And then I just have one more question, which is just clarification from you. The lease versus the option. The lease would precede an option opportunity, correct? Maybe not?
It can, the likelihood is that if someone is leasing something, that is someone who's likely not going to be doing a larger scale project. So that's someone who is interested maybe in an individual garden, or, potentially putting a swing setup or something like that. Whereas an option really is for folks who have, who need that time where they have control of the property but can work out the rest of their project.
So we're changing the terminology a little bit against the way we've been using those terms right now, would you say? Because just for the specific example that
Yeah.
you and
I would say the option is, well, it's obviously new because this is the first time we brought it up to you. And to use that example, based on how that conversation is going, that could be an option as well. But initially, I think if you look at the lease is just, I want the yard across the street, or I want the yard next to my house, but maybe we feel it's a neighborhood that's getting a lot of momentum and we don't want to sell it. It still gives the individual owner or individual person an opportunity to use that garden, or, I'm sorry, that lot.
Sure.
Versus, let's just say maybe a more person or professional with the means to do, even if it's a single family or a multifamily or that type of stuff. Again, a lot of the conversations that I've had with people is I need to show my lenders, or I need to show certain people that we have site control. And the last thing we want to do is sell them the property before they really even are in a position to start their project.
When we say lease, we don't mean the same thing as when I lease a car, which has a payment associated with it.
Yeah,
We mean free.
you want to say $1 for legal purpose?
Use.
I'm not charging anybody anything.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, because I think lease has a connotation of that there's money changing hands on a monthly basis, and that's just not correct.
No money involved.
Okay, that's it for me, thank you.
Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. Having reviewed a majority of these policies, I do have one question in section 2.2, line B. Says the goals of this policy and disposition of WCLB owned property are to B, eliminate blight and revitalize neighbors. Should that be neighborhoods?
Yes, it should be.
Okay, because it was in the old copy and it's in the new copy. I just wanted to make sure I was reading it
When you know
properly.
what you're reading, sometimes you miss those ones.
And the next question I would have, we're not putting an extra layer in that would slow down the process, are we? Are we setting policy that would help expedite things? Because we, as commissioners, hear how hard it is to get things through in order to have investment in our community. So are we not creating another layer by just giving the example that the commissioner expressed a few minutes ago?
I would say no, and I really appreciate that question. But I think if it has to slow down, it's because more information may be needed. There may be more vetting that needs to be done on our side. I wouldn't look at it that way, but there could be some scenarios where the normal time frame we've been accustomed to using may slow down. And a lot of that's just predicated on the fact that your meetings are scheduled on the calendar. I mean, there's nothing we can do about that. So, but the goal is always going to be to try to get things and the most information so you guys can make an informative decision is really what we're always going to strive to do.
Do you have a standard form if somebody come in that would identify things real quickly so they don't have to read through the policies? And if someone is having to wait, that they could actually just pick up a blueprinted form and say, these are the 4 or 5 criteria you need, and out the door they go, and an hour later they can come back with the form filled out and know what they need?
We're in the process of creating brochures that explain all our programs. And
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Well, certainly, we appreciate you bringing forward this revision this evening. I think you can anticipate, based on the questions we've generated here tonight, I think you can anticipate that we'll have quite a bit of discussion between now and our August meeting to kind of flesh out some of these things. I certainly see a different terminology in use in the current document compared to what we've had with the elimination of holds, except there's a qualification on that, and the introduction of an option under certain circumstances. And I think we want to be clear that we know exactly what each of these different alternatives entails, and that we are very clear that the policy will drive practice of staff. So once again, for everyone, this is for information only. This opens the discussion. We now have, our next meeting will be on August 19th, and so we have from now until August 19th, or actually for the next couple of weeks, to engage in some robust discussion, to make sure that any concerns we have are addressed, any questions we have are answered, and that way this can be submitted in time to be included in the agenda packet that will go out for our meeting of August 19. Before we close this item, I'd like to ask if anyone here in attendance would like to comment on this first item. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close this first item. And Mr. Slaughter, I'll turn it over to you for Land Bank item number 2.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have some transfers. These properties, as you can see, are a block of 11th and Riverview and North 12th Street. And they are outlined here in red, kind of surrounding the green area. This transfer request, this first picture is a picture looking east on the Riverview, or I'm sorry, this is the looking south on the 12th Street, and this is looking east on the Riverview, the one on the right. So this is a request for transfer to CHWC, and this project is called the Panoramic Park. And generally what they want to do is repeat the success they've had at Waterway Park. I think we were all familiar with that area. It'll be some mixed income housing, single family, some studio, 3-bedroom, 2 apartment, 2 and 2 housing. So that's primarily the information I have. I know there are some people from CHWC here in the audience tonight. If there's any other questions, but the request would be for a transfer to them.
So to orient everyone, the green square in the center is the old site of Bethany Medical Center, now razed, which is owned by Community Housing of Wyandotte County. They've owned it, been paying taxes, been maintaining that. And what they want to acquire in red are what used to be 2 parking lots for Bethany Medical Center back when it was open north of Riverview and west of 12th Street. And if I could, I know that Brennan Crawford from CHWC is here. And if I could trouble you, Mr. Crawford, to just come on up to the podium here, or actually, you can come on up to the podium. Give us just a little bit of background about your vision for the housing that you'll develop in what are now land bank lots. And if you could make sure that the green light is on at the base of your microphone.
It is indeed.
Perfect, thank you.
Brennan Crawford with Community Housing Wyandotte County. I've also got Megan Painter here, our real estate development project manager, in case there are questions more complicated than I can answer. So a little bit of background on this project. Some of you may know that we've owned the parcel in the center, that 6-acre parcel. We inherited that parcel from the Sisters of Charity back in 2006. The intention was to partner with the Housing Authority and to develop about 60 units of assisted living there. That project moved quite far along in pre-development, and then 2007 happened. The tax credit market collapsed, and there was no financing available, et cetera, et cetera. So since then, the vision has been the same, to develop an intergenerational community where families can age in place, from independent living, family living, all the way to assisted living and higher levels of care. Not to belabor the point, but one of the reasons that this project has been so challenging is the site conditions where the old hospital was. There's still about half a hospital buried there. I'm being a little hyperbolic, but there's a significant amount of hospital foundation left there, and so the site infrastructure costs are getting less prohibitive, but challenging. So the history of the project is that we intended to do the larger project first and then develop along the periphery, because even 3 years ago, I would have told you that the market wouldn't support the development of infill, particularly for sale, along those perimeter lots. Well, a lot has changed in the last couple of years. With continued development in McKinley and Waterway, we've sold everything that we put a shovel in the ground for in St. Ben's. They're south of Central. So the conditions are really different. And I think that we have an opportunity to actually start at the periphery and work our way into the center site. And there are some kind of things in the works there too. So the idea is that the perimeter would include 12 or 13 single-family homes, some or all of which with some kind of an accessory dwelling to permit, an aging adult or perhaps a kid back from school or whatever the case is. So it would consist of 8 triplex units. Those would be mixed income rental, and then the remaining 13 would be for sale, single family, with probably a mix of completely market rate and maybe a little bit of home funded or otherwise assisted on the for sale side.
Thank you very much. And the question, one of the questions that I got was, do you need all of those parcels at one time as a function of the project?
So it would be possible to take them in chunks, for sure. I guess the question that I would ask is, so, we've been paying taxes and mowing that center 6 acres for 10 years now. And that's the case with kind of the rest of the scattered infill lots that we have not been able to develop to date, some of which you're going to hear about a little later. You might be wondering why you're trying to take a bunch of lots and give some back, right? The reason is that my strategy has been to focus our limited resources on development that I think we can actually get done in a reasonable period of time. I'm not interested in increasing our tax and mowing bill on an ongoing basis. So these lots, we've got funding applications out, home, AHP through the Federal Home Loan Bank, some of which is contingent upon the kind of the conversation that we've been having with the land bank for quite a while now, that some component of those would be donated. It's a scoring criteria for the affordable housing program. So that's also kind of a factor to consider. All that is to say, we have a letter of interest from our private financier. We have some applications out for the soft sources. So we're pretty confident that this is going to move forward. I wouldn't want to pick up the bill otherwise.
Thank you very much. Well, certainly, I'm near these lots on a daily basis, and it would be a blessing to the neighborhood if these lots were developed from the vacant ground that is there now, from Reynolds up to Riverview, and then from 12th over to 11th Street. Emmy Pearson Elementary School is just out of the frame to the north or to the top of the picture, so it also plays into the picture here. Does any member of the committee have any questions for Mr. Slaughter or Mr. Crawford? Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you. Mr. Crawford, do all of your homes include basements?
They do. Well, all except for 4 out of, 300 that we built over the last 15 years.
So the request I would have is are slab homes and slab designs acceptable or possible, or even villas that have a community shelter built for the center, so that those difficult lots that are, quote, not buildable because of an infrastructure underneath them, can they be utilized for slabs or villas with a common bunker area built for the community?
It's a complicated question. Are you talking about these particular lots?
I'm talking
You're talking about in general?
I'm talking about your lots in particular, because I do see that you want us to take some lots back.
Sure.
Because of the debris. And in your statement, you talked about the buried debris and infrastructure that was sub terra firma. So that being the case,
Okay.
can we
Now
not
I'm tracking.
slab that or put villas in there and build a community shelter?
The short answer is no. Single family requires a FEMA shelter here in Kansas. And so the lots that you're seeing that we're asking to give back, those are along Ann Avenue, and the topography is really, really challenging there. So the other thing that I'll say about that, just a little bit more, is that what we found, particularly building like a reasonably sized footprint house, 1,400 feet, we serve a lot of extended families. And so by the time that you excavate for the frost footings that you have to pour anyway for a slab, when you factor in hitting debris that you often hit in any infill project, it typically tends to be wiser to just go ahead and build them with the basement. Close to cost neutral, and definitely helps you on the appraisal side.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
Any other questions for Mr. Crawford or Mr. Slaughter? If not, we are open for a motion on this proposal.
Move to approve.
There's been a motion and a second to approve this transfer as requested. Is there any further discussion among the committee? Any input or discussion from those in attendance? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Roll call. Walters?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
Burrows? McKiernan?
Aye. Thank you. That takes us now up to item number 3, which is an item we've already previewed as a function of item number 2. Mr. Slaughter, if you'd present item number 3.
Okay, we have the donations request for tonight, 6800 Speaker Road, 736 Split Log Avenue, 846 Ohio Avenue, 1305, 1307, 1309H, 1311, 1315, 1319, and 1325 Ann Avenue, 648 Winona Avenue, and 4011H Springfield Street. So this is the Speaker Road. This is the Amazon building, and this is existing UG right-of-way. So the property that they're requesting tonight to donate is, I've kind of tried to make it here in this green. And that was land acquired for the Amazon project, and they just have indicated they no longer have a need for that. And there's a picture I took from the road. 736 Split Log outlined here in black, and there's a street view of that lot. 846 Ohio outlined in black, another street view. These are the Ann properties, and as mentioned, McKinley School, Bishop Ward Field. And these are 2 street views, and I did drive down the alley, and there are some open spaces along with that. 638 Winona Avenue is right here. It's a little triangle-shaped building. And there's a front picture of that. And 4011H Springfield is this little sliver here. There's a picture of that. So those are the requests before you tonight, and I'll entertain any questions.
I have a question on the slivers, this one and the very first one. What is the land bank going to do with those properties?
Well, the first one I figured would just extend our, like I said, our current right-of-way that is already under UG control.
So it becomes UG property forever, probably.
Yeah, and that's one of the items the land asset management team is working on, is those type of assets, what we do, where do they sit? We may be, if it comes to the land, we may be coming at a later time asking to transfer that to the unified government for control. And then the last one, kind of an interesting story. The current owner purchased that at one of our recent tax sales. He obviously didn't do his due diligence because he thought he was getting the house, which is a little bit out of frame here at 4011. He said he's approached both neighbors about it. They've been unresponsive about it. This is a head scratcher for me, so I'll just leave it at that. It is current on its taxes.
I do believe, commissioners, that this one we can work through once it's back in the land bank to do something with. The other one is a matter of right-of-way. I don't know what our future development plans are, but it may be a benefit for us to have that as an easement in the case of development in that area and go forward in the future. So, though right now, logically, the first one, which is out by the Amazon building, may not make a whole lot of sense. It could have future benefit. As for this one, I believe there's some work that we can do through planning and zoning to work through this issue.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Townsend?
I guess I was looking off. I'm sorry, Mr. Slaughter. I did have a question about the property at 638 Winona. Do you have more of a background story on that? What the particular circumstances are that is making the present owner unable to maintain the property?
Yeah, he's an elderly gentleman, and I believe a lot of the ongoing maintenance has been done or attempting to be done by his daughter who lives out of the county. So I have a great idea for this building if we were to take it, involving the rehab program.
Okay.
And I've started some conversations with some of our contractors about it. I will add, just from scheduling difficulties, I don't know what the inside of it looks like, but if you walk around the outside, at least from the structure standpoint, it looks like it's in pretty good shape. It could use a little TLC there in the front, but I definitely would have no problem taking this into our rehab program inventory.
Okay, thank you. That answers a lot of questions that I had about it. Is the owner a Wyandotte County? No, they're not a Wyandotte County resident. I'm seeing Mission, Kansas here on a post office box, but
I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming with the daughter's involvement, he may live with her.
okay. But I'm happy to know that you have some plans for it to make it viable on that corner. Thank you.
I would just say that I am familiar with all the properties on Ann Avenue and on Split Log. I do thank CHWC for paying the taxes on those. There's all current on taxes. And I think that these may be a remnant of an earlier hold-type program of 10 or 15 years ago when there was a bigger plan than they've executed. So, Mr. Crawford, you've built on Grandview Boulevard, you've gone north and built on Barnett. This is the next block north. You built the corner lot, which has the coolest view in town, but I think that exposed some of the challenges of the site. So you built 1329, and that kind of exposed some of the challenges that you're going to run into in the remainder of those lots, at least at this time.
So that actually gets worse from there.
And you'd actually prefer to put your efforts then into the Riverview and 12th Street lots than into these.
Yes.
All right.
Short answer is yes.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Slaughter? If not, I would entertain a motion on these submissions.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second to approve these donations as submitted. Any more comment or question among the committee? Any comments or discussion from those in attendance tonight? Seeing no one coming forward, roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
Burrows, McKiernan.
Aye. Thank you so much. We appreciate your work. Mr. Slaughter, item number 4.
Okay, we now are going to do our monthly rehab program update. Our number of contractors continues to rise. We are sitting at 144 currently. And our houses are gone down. We're currently sitting at 77. Houses with no offers is at 13, and that number will definitely be coming down next month. Demos completed, we're still sitting at 33, and the ones recommended are still at 11. Rehab started, we're up to 50. And houses awaiting closing, we're sitting at 3. Completed rehabs is now up to 36. This brings us to 2 that have just been completed since the last time we met. So this is 2315 Maxine Williams Drive. And just some before pictures. There was obviously an attempted rehab going on when we got it, so the rehabber periodically thanks me for that. And this is a picture with the rehab completed. And as you can see, again, some good quality work. There's some kitchen pics, some of the bathroom. Upstairs space with an upstairs bathroom. Some updated mechanicals. So this property was from tax sale 338 in August of 17, and the minimum bid at the time was over $7,000. It took 15 months for the rehab. The appraised value when we got the property was just a little over $4,000, and it's currently listed for $80,000. And the last one tonight is 2721 North 21st Street. Not in bad shape from what we're used to. Some of the old mechanicals. And this is a picture of the finished product, the nice blue door there. And some shots of the interior. Updated mechanicals. This property was in tax sale 339 in December of 17. Almost $10,000 was the minimum bid at the time. Did take 9 months. It was just about $20,500 when we received it, and it's currently going to be rented for about $700 a month. So every time I've been to this neighborhood, this really just adds to a really healthy neighborhood. I mean, after a while, you're not going to realize that it was the last one rehab, because there's a lot of nice houses and they're well kept in that area. So that's the rehab update for this month.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Any member of the committee have any comments or questions for Mr. Slaughter on the rehab program? Commissioner Burrows and then Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that report. We're seeing some great successes. I'm going to go back to the vacated properties that we accepted back to the land bank. You talked about demolition, and they're coming, we're getting a handle on those. Are we just pushing dirt into foundations, or are we moving foundations out so that we can rehab the property? Because how did we end up with so much property with basements in them that we can't put back into service?
Just from the conversations I have and not having any association with that department, it's my understanding that that practice ended, I think, well back in the 90s. Maybe Melissa could probably answer that better.
I don't have specific details like Mr. Slaughter, but what I can tell you is that at one point, we had some outside help from a federal agency helping us with demolitions, and the practice was to put the stuff into the hole, which was the basement or cellar of the property. Unfortunately, that's left us with a lot of work to do on some of these properties, which I'm assuming is what Mr. Crawford is referring to. That is not an allowed practice anymore, and we certainly do struggle with that because it does create a complication when we get into these properties. So glad that practice has stopped. Unfortunately, we have the past practices to deal with.
Do we have a recourse to go back on that agency or that organization to help offset the cost of?
I don't have an answer for that tonight, Commissioner, and we certainly could look into it, but it was a federal agency, so I'm not certain what recourse we would have.
Yes, and generally, when we accept money, we do it under their conditions. When we accept their money for a project, we do it under their conditions and standards at the time, even if they're not what we would like.
I would hope that if a federal agency is going to come into our city and provide us a service, that even if that service is deemed proper at the time and then is seen as not, that there would be allowances in providing dollars to remediate that property, to put it back into a taxable sale for development, and to not proceed forward with some kind of an understanding or questioning just says what they've done is okay, and therefore the new developers or we as a community are going to accept that. So I just would hope that we would give strong consideration to finding a way to remedy these properties, because I believe that these aren't the only properties that has occurred with.
No, Commissioner, you're completely correct. There are a multitude of them scattered throughout the community. I believe part of what our land asset management team is doing is trying to identify some of that type of stuff as well. I don't have a complete listing today to tell you how many of them are, but there were numerous of them at some point. And I've come to learn this on a variety of different projects since I've been here.
Commissioner Townsend.
Again, Mr. Slaughter, thank you and everyone who's working with you on the rehab project. I mean, it's continuing to make a great positive difference with housing options and eradicating blight. With the two that you showed, which happen to be, I think, both in District 1, the house on Maxine Williams Drive, how many bedrooms is that, do you know?
I believe it's 2. I'm assuming their third could be added in that upper space. And again, there is a bathroom on that second floor as well.
Just in case anybody's looking. And the one on North 21st Street that seemed to be available at a very reasonable price, how many bedrooms is that one?
I believe that was 2.
2, okay. Again, if anybody's looking. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Mr. Slaughter? Seeing none, we thank you for your presentation and for your work. That is the last item on the Neighborhood and Community Development agenda. This meeting is adjourned. We'll give a chance for BPU Board Member Bryant to make it up to the table, and then we will reconvene as Economic Development and Finance.
The Economic Development Finance Standing Committee to order. We want to welcome everyone to this meeting. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on an item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when the item is up for discussion. You'll have up to 3 minutes to state your comments. please come forward to the microphone and you will be recognized. For accurate reporting purposes, we ask you all present to speak directly into a microphone. At this point, I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Roll call. Bryant.
Here.
Walters.
Here.
Murguia. We have Commissioner Bynum sitting in
Here.
for Commissioner Murguia. Townsend.
Here.
McKiernan. Burrows.
Here. We have no revisions to tonight's agenda that I'm aware of. Staff, no revisions, correct? Wonderful. Okay. Next, I'd entertain a motion for approval of the minutes if you've had a chance to review them.
Move to approve as submitted.
Motion been made and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, the minutes are approved. Thank you, committee. First thing on our agenda tonight, out of the 9 items this evening, is the quarterly 2019 budget to actual reports. We have Kathleen Von Atchen and Reginald Lindsay here to make the presentation. So take it away.
Good evening. As Commissioner, we're bringing to you the first quarter report, which outlines the level of revenue and expenditures that occurred between January and the end of March. So that seems like the end of March was a while ago, but it takes us a while to close the financial transactions of a given month, and then to prepare this report, and then there's a little bit of lead time with preparing this document for all of you to review before it comes before the committee. So, ideally, we would like to be able to streamline that a little bit more. But right now, we've got the first quarter here in front of you. Later on this evening, we will be providing you with up-to-date, year-to-date information regarding our revenue and expenditures through the end of May in order to give you a snapshot of where we're sitting financially in the current fiscal year. But that will be part of our budget workshop that is following this meeting, all right? So I'm going to start off. We typically start off with a review of the consolidated general fund, and then we move into revenues, and then my budget director, Reginald Lindsay, will talk about the expenditure side, as well as the financial status of all the other UG funds. Right now, through the end of March, which represents 25% of the fiscal year, we are sitting at with a fund balance of $45 million. Now, that seems like a whole lot of money, right? But you must remember that in the first month of the fiscal year, we collect 1/2 of the total property taxes for that given calendar year's fiscal transactions. So we have typically at this point, we have a high level of liquidity, which is demonstrated if you compare the same period last year, which was at roughly $38 million. So we have revenues coming, we have budgeted revenues of $216 million coming in, and we have collected $71 million. That compares well with the prior year, which was at $70 million. On the expenditure side, we budgeted $219 million. $51 million have been spent year-to-date. That's below the 25% target and is in line with how much we spent last year, also at $51 million. So just a reminder, this is the original budget, not the amended budget that we presented to all of you last week. So the original budget had a net margin difference of $2.7 million. That means that's the amount we are going to be taking from fund balance if we were to collect that amount of revenue and expenditures, as budgeted, right? All right, so now this is the entire consolidated budget. It includes city, county, and the parks. All right, so now what we're going to talk about briefly are the revenues for the city and the county general funds. This one's the city general fund, and this presentation shows budget to actual. So this column is how much we have budgeted in these various revenue sources in the original budget. And as you can see, as I mentioned, 58% of the total property tax budget was collected in the first month or two of the fiscal year. That's why we have 58%. It's at 58% instead of 25%. You know, if all the revenues came in at the same time, each or the same level every month, it would be roughly 25%. But since there's seasonality in depending on the revenue source, those percentages change or different. Sales tax. Now, sales tax typically does have a little bit of seasonality, peaks and flows, but for the most part, it is pretty constant from one month to the next. And so, as you can see, $47.9 million was estimated to be received for the entire year from sales and use taxes, those sales and use tax. And through the end of March, we only collected 5.9 million, which represents 19.8% or roughly 20%. So ideally, if those monies were coming in at a regular stream month over month, that would be roughly 25%, not 19 or 20, not 20%. So you can see there's a little bit of shortfall there or a lower performance. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in more detail, actually, in the coming budget workshop. But this is just a snapshot through the end of March. Other taxes are performing as expected. This one's at 25%. Other taxes include franchise taxes and motor vehicle registration and a variety of other taxes. Licenses are a little down. Sometimes, you know, that does depend on seasonality, especially with building permits typically happening later in the spring. Intergovernmental revenues are wholly dependent on when we receive the money from the governmental agency. Charges for services, the largest portion is trash and trash services. So those are pretty constant throughout the year, and they're at 25%. Fines and fees are performing as expected, and miscellaneous and transfers those are sort of dependent on when the actual transfers are done in our financial system, so they vary from month to month. So this is a chart that kind of outlines how graphically the information here. Oh, no, actually, pardon me. This is a graph that illustrates, the blue illustrates the level of collection in the same quarter last year, and the red represents the amount collected this year in that same quarter. So you can see that property tax is higher, the collection level is higher than it was at this point last year. And naturally, that's because assessed value improved. Sales tax, though, is down. The red bar is below the blue quite substantially, which we'll talk about. Other taxes are a little bit more, are down from the prior year. So those are the largest ones. Now, so actually the data in this year-over-year, quarter-over-quarter comparison is actually that the actual data for that graph is demonstrated in this chart here. And so you can see property taxes compared with the prior year, we've collected about $181,000 less than we did at the same period last year. But the largest one is sales tax. We've collected $1.15 million less in this quarter than we did in the same period last year. And I did want to point out that, you know, when we were looking at the distributions from the state, as I mentioned in the prior meeting, the performance of the retail sales activity in the first 6 months of 2018 was very significant. It was substantially higher than it was in the prior 2017 period. So it's odd because we saw kind of a steady growth through 17, a big bump at the beginning of 18, and then a dramatic drop in the end of 18. And so when you're making these comparisons, you have to kind of keep that in mind because this amount in 18, the $10 million in 18, we were basically collecting more than we anticipated during that period. But now but the same period in 19, we're now collecting less than we anticipated in that period. So it kind of exaggerates or makes this delta seem, even greater than it may be. So it's, the causes for the sales tax performance, we're going to discuss in more detail in the upcoming budget workshop, okay? But this is, again, a snapshot of just through March. Now, the county revenues, which are much more dependent on property taxes, are doing better. Again, the property tax, we've collected 58% of that revenue source. The sales tax, again, is at 19% of what we anticipated in the original budget. But overall, total collections are at 44 or 45% of the total. And similar figures presented for the county compared with the same quarter performance of the prior year. Any questions on the revenues before I pitch it over to Reggie for the expenditure side? Yes.
Mr.
Not so much a question as just a reminder. I feel it's my responsibility to remind the commission that I know that you're going into budget, and I know that the pilot fee is always on your mind. So this year, looking at the numbers on our spreadsheet in the BPU, the pilot is projected to gather over $30 million in revenue this year for the unified government. So I know that you guys have had the pilot rate at 11.99 for a while now. I would ask that you take a very close look at that, on the availability of maybe lowering that, considering that the evaluations have gone up. So revenue is hopefully been a little bit better. So that's my plug for the year.
All right, I'm going to touch on the expenditures for the city general fund. Basically, what we have here are two views. We have budget to actuals up here in the left-hand corner that compares it to the original budget and what we've spent year to date. And then down here in the left-hand corner, we have year over year, what we spent in 2019 compared to 2018. So up here in the budget to actuals, comparing this year's budget to what we spent so far this year, kind of what Kathleen talked about, she's touched on 25% for the revenues where we want to be over that. But on the expenditure side, we want to be 25% under on budget. So basically here we can see in personnel, we are like right at 24%. Basically here in personnel, we have our expenditures for salaries, benefits, and overtime that employees get paid. And here in services, we can see we're at almost 18%. And here in services, we pay for things like our transit contract, our trash contract. Those are some of the big contracts there. In supplies, we see we are almost 17%. And here we pay for things like our natural gas, our fuel, and vehicle parts. So we can see just overall in the city general fund on the expenditure side, we're at 22%. If we go down and compare it to 2018 actuals, we can see that we have spent a little bit more in personnel, and that's because our personnel expenses are running more this year. The services, we are spending a little bit less. Basically, we did cut back some expenditure, so that's one of the reasons we're spending less. And supplies, we have spent a little bit more. And one of the things that's going on here is just the fuel costs. We can see overall down here at the bottom, we've spent $256,000 more year to date than we spent in 2018. So moving on to the county general fund, and again, we have two different views. One that compares the 2019 budget to what we've actually spent, and then also a comparison of the 2019 budget to what we spent in 2018 at this time last year. So rule of thumb here again is we want to be 25% under budget, but we can see here that we're a little bit over 27%. And we can see personnel, we're under 25%. But here in services is kind of where we kick up at 43%. So basically what's going on there is we have inmate housing and inmate medical. It's kind of ticked up this year. So that's where we're up there. And then supplies, we can see we haven't spent all the money here. We got like 8.2%. And then grants and claims, these are basically grant payments that go out at the beginning of the year. So a lot of the money gets spent up there first, so that's why we're over the 25%. And down here, we can see, as we compare year-to-date what we spent in 2018 to 2019, we are a little up in personnel. And basically what's going on there is just personnel costs do go up. Services, not too much more. And then in supplies, we're $143,000 less right now. And then our grants and claims are $117,000 more. But overall, in this category, in the general fund, we're $275,000 above what we spent in 2018's actuals. As I move on here, this slide here illustrates basically, gives us a snapshot of revenue expenditures for our other 9 tax levy funds. And basically here on the left-hand side, we have the revenues where we want to be over 25%. And then here we have the expenditures where we want to be under 25%. So we can see basically here on the revenue side with the other tax levy funds, we're 33% collection. And then over here with the expenditures, we're at 21%, and we look to be at under 25% here at this time of the year. Basically here's a snapshot of 20 other funds that include like our special revenue funds and our enterprise funds. And on the left side here, we have revenues again, and then on the right side, we have the expenditures. And basically here the rule of thumb, we want to be over 25% in the revenues, and over here on the expenditure side, we want to be below 25%. And we can see we're at 21, a little over 21%. Are there any questions about any of the information we just went over?
Committee, any questions? Any questions from the public? Let it be known, nobody's stepping forward. If you'll please approach the microphone, list your name, address, so we can record it properly, please. You have 3 minutes.
My name is Michelle Franks. Is this part of the mill levy, or you're going to talk about that separately?
This is just an overview, it's just for information only. We will be working on the budget workshop after 7 o'clock this evening.
Okay, because we were told that we could come and voice our opinion about the mill levy and our property taxes.
That would probably be best to be done at 7 o'clock at the full budget workshop.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, that concludes your presentation. As I stated earlier, this is for information only. We'll move on to item 2, first quarter budget revision report. And I'm to understand, Reggie, you will be doing the honors again.
Yes. So basically what happens is when departments request to shift $10,000 or more, we have to submit a request to the county administrator's office. And if that request is over $50,000, we have to submit a request to the mayor and the county administrator if it is an emergency. If it's not an emergency, we have to bring it back to the standing committee, and then it moves on to the commission. So this past, or in quarter 1, we had 2 budget revisions, one in the CKO's office or the Knowledge Department, and then one in Sunflower Hills. Both were under the $50,000 threshold, so they did go to the county administrator's office for signature, and they did have the funding moved from within the departments.
Great, thank you. And I believe that came out of the committee's request here a couple committees back. If I remember, a couple meetings back, we'd like to have these reports in a more timely manner. So I sincerely appreciate that information coming forward. Instead of waiting until
And
you're.
yeah, it's in compliance with our policy, and we're trying to follow our policy more strictly.
Great, thank you. Does any member have any questions or comments? Anyone from the public want to address this item? Seeing none, we'll move on. This was, again, for information purposes only. That takes us to item number 3, which is a presentation by Kathleen in reference to fire apparatus lease purchase turn-in agreement with PNC Equipment Finance. I'll note that staff has requested to fast-track this item to Thursday's full commission meeting committee. So Kathleen?
Thank you. Joining me is Fire Chief Michael Callahan and Deputy Chief Jack Andrade, who have come. They originally came to see me back in the fall of 2018 with some ideas for reducing our the acquisition costs and the financing costs of the acquiring various assets to improve our performance in the fire area. So that tonight's presentation, we're discussing the acquisition of 2 aerial trucks and 4 pumpers. And their idea was to basically enter into a program provided by Pierce, which is affiliated with PNC Financing Corporation. It's a turn-in program, all right? Now, we're going to talk in more detail about this turn-in lease financing, the lease purchase program. But quickly, I just wanted to let you know that all the documents in front of you, which include for form, the lease agreement, as well as the certificate from Pierce, as required by the state law, and the rider for Kansas. All of those documents are presented to you in substantially in the form in which they will be signed. The authorized signatories are the mayor and/or the county administrator, and all of the provisions of the financings, in terms of the interest rate and such, have already been negotiated. And I'm happy to present all that kind of detail if you're interested, but this presentation is a little bit more broader than that. They've also been reviewed by our external bond counsel, Gilmore and Bell, and internal counsel, Angela Lawson. So at the end of the night tonight, what we'll be asking you to do is to take action to approve the resolution to enter into the agreement, to agree to, by substantial form, to allow the mayor and the county administrator to sign these the lease agreement documents, and to fast track it to Thursday, July 11th. Now, the reason there's a fast track is because at the end of this quarter, which is the second quarter, July 31st, we will no longer be able to take advantage of this prepaid discount that I'm about to talk with you about. So if we waited till later on at the next commission meeting, it wouldn't give us enough time to close and take advantage of that discount. So it's roughly about a $55,000 discount. So that's the reason for the fast track. So briefly, to go over this PowerPoint, during 2018, the Kansas Fire Department, they decided to evaluate the needed size of the current fire apparatuses that are needing to be replaced. And what the chief determined is that those apparatuses that were in the plan, in the CMIP for 19 and 20, which were 4 pumpers and 2 aerials, that the size of them, especially in regards to the pumpers, were too large. And so that we could be better served by a smaller size pumper. And by doing that, and the chief's going to talk about that a little bit more, but by doing that, as I've outlined here, previously the budgeted amount to acquire the 4 pumpers, was $790,000 each. And the smaller size pumpers actually cost $580,000. So that's a total savings amongst the 4 pumpers of $840,000. That savings is offset slightly by the need to acquire a slightly more expensive aerial truck, which results in about $100,000 more than was budgeted for those 2 fiscal years. So just the evaluation of the needs assessment of these assets resulted in a more appropriate sizing and a reduced cost of acquisition of $742,000. So rather than spending $5.6 million on the acquisition of these assets, we're only spending $4.458 million. So I want to thank the chief for looking through this, and if you have any more comments on that, I'm happy to give you a chance to talk about it further.
No, you can go on. Keep going.
Let me get. So then, on top of that savings, we want to talk about the lease turn-in and the benefits of this program. So currently, right now, when we lease equipment, we typically lease to purchase it. So something costs $1 million and we're going to pay for it over 10 years. And then at the end of the 10 years, and we'll pay a certain low percentage interest rate. At the end of the 10 years, we own the asset and we put it into our inventory. Well, the problem is with these sorts of movable assets, especially if they're assigned to fire stations that are very busy and have a high volume of call for service, by the end of the 10 years, the asset is completely exhausted and has its useful life has been spent. But we're still having to dispose of the asset, and the utility of that asset is diminished greatly towards the latter part of its life. So in this lease turn-in program, what we achieve is to finance the thing for the asset for a shorter amount of time, right? But we also are financing a lesser amount than the total acquisition price. So basically what we're doing is we're gonna, and this is only for the fire stations that are the busiest. Think of it that way. So those assets are used up the quickest. Those assets will be utilized over the course of, say, instead of 10 years, 8 years. We don't pay that extra amount in order to keep the asset at the end. And so that extra amount is what we're calling the balloon payment. By doing a turn-in, we turn in the asset a few years prior to the term. We don't pay that balloon payment, and as a result, we're actually financing a lesser amount and still at that low rate. And we don't end up with an asset that has a high maintenance cost attached to it and that we have to dispose of. So in 2019, the Kansas City, Kansas Fire Department proposed that we acquire 6 apparatuses. This is among their total fleet. Their total fleet is, I don't remember how big their total, 20? 22. So this is just a portion of their total fleet. It's the portion that was planned to be replaced in these coming years, the 19 and 20 year. And it's for just the stations that have the highest volume of calls. So it's the 2 pumpers, or the 2 trucks or aerials, and the 4 pumpers. And the turn-in lease allows the UG to return the apparatus to Pierce when the asset has been fully utilized, just prior to the balloon payment being due. And also, in addition, there's this prepayment discount that is being offered, and that has to do more with the timing of the delivery of the asset and giving us a discount if we pay ahead of time. It's an advantage that we hadn't taken advantage of before, but it has to do with the timing of the payment, which for the UG, we have the liquidity to make the payment ahead of time and rather than afterwards. So the prepayment discount offer, in addition to the savings from downsizing or better acquiring assets at the size that that we needed. We also are doing that prepayment discount, which offers us another $55,000 acquisition cost reduction. So I've provided a kind of a table here that kind of outlines all the different the savings by this program. So on the first column is how much we planned on spending on these assets during 19 and 20, which was $5.2 million. By revising the size, we took a look at that, and now the revised acquisition cost is $4.4 million, resulting in a savings of $741,000. We're taking advantage of the Pierce prepayment discount, which totals $55,000. So as a result, the total acquisition with the discount, the amount that we'll be financing is $4.4 million. And that's a savings of $796,000. Now, had we just leased the entire $5.2 million, that first column, with our existing lease purchase, program, the total payments, principal and interest, would have been $6.172 million. But with this turn-in lease program, not including the payment of the balloon payments, what we'll be paying is $4.375 million in lease payments, which results in a savings of almost $1.8 million. And so we highly recommend that you approve this recommendation. And the next slide, we're going to outline some of the other benefits that the chief wanted to share with you.
So good evening, everybody. First off, I want to thank Kathleen and her people because they did a lot of work on these numbers, as you can see. So when we first came forward with this proposal to county administration and finance, what we're endeavoring to do is to replace a fleet that is significantly behind in the NFPA standard 1901, which calls for frontline rigs to be replaced every 10 years, and then spare apparatus to be replaced every 15 years. It's going to take our frontline compliancy from 50% NFPA compliant to 78% with this program. It's going to significantly extend the lifespan of the current apparatus in terms of the ability to get these apparatus that we're leasing back into the hands of Pierce so they can resell them and then be replaced with brand-new apparatus. We're going to take the apparatus, this is going to get a little convoluted, but we're going to take the current apparatus that are in all the fire stations, and the ones that we're going to lease are going to be put into the fire station, and that current rig is going to be given to another company, another fire company. Their rig will be put into our spare fleet. So that's going to give us an opportunity to replenish and update our spare fleet, which is very deficient as it's currently constituted. And I don't really have anything more to say unless there are further questions from the commission.
I did want to point out, as part of the, we did work with purchasing, and we are proceeding with this based on a piggyback with other communities that have also, in the region, who are also undertaking this program. And it's highly recommended by the other communities in Kansas and on the Missouri side. So.
Thank you. Any questions, committee?
Move for approval.
Second.
We have Commissioner Townsend with a question.
No problem. Good evening, Chief, Deputy Chief, Ms. Bonnie Atchin. Chief, you kind of lost me on the end. Provides the opportunity to replenish and update our spare fleet. My understanding was that using this lease process before the asset is totally expended, its useful life, are we turning those back in? How does this process help us update our spare fleet?
So we're not leasing vehicles for the entire fire department. It's a partial lease program. The vehicles that are going to be leased are for the busiest companies, busiest fire engines and fire trucks, pumpers. The rest of the rigs we're still going to own. So the ones that we own would become part of our spare fleet. And the leased vehicles, the leased apparatus, the pumpers and the trucks, those would go into the fire station, and their current vehicle, it's like a hand-me-down program, would go to a slower company that doesn't run as much. And that vehicle, in that slower company, the current vehicle would become part of the spare fleet. We own those vehicles.
Okay.
The leased vehicles, obviously, we don't own them, but it's going to help us in terms of we're giving them the companies with high run volume, and they need to be replaced more cyclically anyway. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. So the ones we already own are going to be reallocated, I don't want to say removed. Repurposed, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Currently, just rough figures, we spend about $2 or $3 million on maintenance of fire fleet, not just the trucks, but other vehicles as well. And we believe that dollar amount will decline by incorporating these new 6 assets into the fleet, because the ones that we're currently replacing are very costly to maintain since they're so old.
Mr. Bryant?
I don't know whether this is better for you, Kathleen, or Chief Callahan, but is it twofold? So what is the length of the lease period, and what is the expected lifespan of these assets under heavy use?
So the length of the lease is going to be for pumpers, that's the ones that carry the water, 8 years. For the trucks with the big ladders on them, it's 10 years. In terms of life expectancy, that's dynamic. It's not a static figure, because if a fire company is in a firehouse and it doesn't move a lot, it's going to last a lot longer than a company that does 12, 14, 20 calls a day. But the NFPA standard doesn't account for that. It simply says after 10 years, any fire vehicle should not be a frontline vehicle anymore. It should go into the spare fleet for the following 5 years, and then after those 5 years totaling 15, it should be gotten rid of.
So just so that I'm clear, 8-year lease, roughly 10 years that it can be frontline. So a couple years after we're no longer paying on the lease, we'll still be able to use it, and then we'll move it to a less moving or less taxing station.
Sort of. So the leased vehicle after 8 years goes back to Pierce, and they give us another one.
Okay.
They give us another brand-new one.
Okay, so we'll actually have a couple years' worth of life left on the vehicle when we give it back, so it's not completely expended.
We won't have the lease. Pierce will sell that vehicle. So right around that 8-year mark is when the vehicle's resale value plummets dramatically or exponentially, whichever you want to say. So that's why Pierce wants to get it back at about the 8-year mark, so that the resale value remains, there's some equity in it for them. You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, there's been a motion and a second. First of all, I need to ask the audience, does anybody from the community want to make a comment? Seeing none, motion's been made and seconded. I'd ask, this is an action item, so I'd ask the clerk to call roll, please.
Roll call, Bryant.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Bynum.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye. I do have a change in agenda. There was an opportunity earlier on in our agenda this evening for the comment on the budget presentation. There was a lady that wanted to comment on the mill levy. She was advised, I don't know where that advice came from, in reference that she would be able to speak this evening. I'm going to go back to that first item and allow the lady to step forward and speak. And I would advise that the next opportunity for the public comment on the budget will be July 25th. That is when the next public comment will be allowed at the full commission meeting, and that, again, is July 25th. I do want to back up to the first part of the agenda this evening, not knowing who sent out the message for you to appear this evening, but the fact that you asked to appear, I'm going to allow you the 3 minutes to make your comments, please. And if
Thank
you
you.
will, list your name and address for the record.
My name is Michelle Franks, and my address is 3936 North 108th Terrace. And I'm coming on behalf of my neighborhood and some other people that are here because we feel our property taxes are overboard. Mine are $6,300 a year. That's a lot, and I don't even have a $400,000 house. And I noticed we were concerned about making sure we piggyback off of what Missouri's doing and Johnson County's doing. Well, I lived in Missouri, and with a $400,000 house, my taxes were only $3,000. So I would like to know why we have to pay such an excessive amount when we were told with all the building of the legends and et cetera, that the taxes would go down once these entities were paid for, that we would actually, taxes would go down for the people that live here. I was born and raised in Wyandotte County. My family lives here. So I just want somebody to tell me what we can do. I've appealed it. They deny me. So I don't know what to do. It's like, they said, well, you need to come to the mill levy meetings. So I'm here.
Staff, were you able to get that request and information? Would you care to repeat what it is, the question specifically?
My question is, what can we as citizens do to get our taxes lowered? What do we need to, do we need to protest? What do we need to do to get our taxes lower? Because they just keep increasing. And I'm not the only one that's unhappy about. There are other people here that are here because of that. And we were told that we could come to this meeting and voice our opinion. Because it doesn't make sense why we have to pay the highest, and we don't even have, with the exception to Sumner, we don't even have the best school district. I lived in Park Hill, in Park, so I can tell you they have a better school district, and taxes are lower. So why do we have to pay such a high amount?
I appreciate the question. We'll get you those answers if we have your address and your name, and we'll follow up with a response, and your response is well noted. I will say that the city and county are only the two entities that you will pay taxes on. You also have a library, a school district, as well as other entities that have the library, the community college, that have taxing authority also. So I would hope that you would give consideration to appearing before them and asking them also the same question.
Okay, well, we just want to know what we can do to get them lowered. I'm sure I'm not alone. Amen. Okay.
Duly noted. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. I just wanted the opportunity also, thank you, Ms. Franks and all the others who've come, since you came to talk about the mill levy, which we'll be looking at later, that for the last, I think my first opportunity to vote on the mill levy was the budget for 2014. That was in 2013. We lowered it, and we've continued to lower the mill levy. That's what this body can do. And as Commissioner says, there are other elective bodies that feed into that mill. So don't forget you have other elected bodies to go and make that same appeal. The other part is we want to see the value of properties rise. So I'd also say part of what you're actually paying, which is really the issue. How much of taxes are you paying? And that's a combination of the mill rate and the assessed value. You might also want to call, and apparently you have, and speak with the assessor. So, if there's anything else that can be done, but I didn't want this opportunity to pass without letting you know, and thank you for coming, and the others who've come, that this body, was just a portion of us here, but later, have done all we can do and continue to do to either maintain or lower the taxes. And that was possible because what year was this? Help me out. That
2017.
the star bonds, thank you, were paid off several years ago. So I understand you may be paying more taxes, but I'm paying them too.
I'm a real estate agent, so I've seen the taxes in Kansas and Missouri license. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm a real estate agent as well, so I've seen the taxes in Kansas, Johnson County, and in Missouri. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense that we have to pay so much more. We have a casino. We have all the other entities that Missouri has as well. So it should be that our taxes should not be that far. I shouldn't be paying double than what I would in Missouri. That doesn't make, or Johnson County, that doesn't make sense.
Well, you've done the right thing by making your concerns known. We appreciate that. I just want to let you know, we're doing what we can to keep the mill rate constant or lower, which we've done in the last 3 or 4 years. I understand what you're talking about, your tax rate. Again, go to the assessors and the other elected bodies as well. And thank you for coming.
Thank you, committee and body. Now, we'll move on to item number 4, which is the NRA Special Project Application for the renovation of the former YMCA building. Staff has requested this item also be fast-tracked for Thursday's meeting. This will be an action item, so with that, I'd ask Kathleen Carter, our Economic Development Director, to start a presentation, please.
Good evening, Catherine Carter, Economic Development. So this project is the Y Lofts. We heard a little bit about this last month, but this is kind of the much more in-depth view of what this project is. I believe most people are familiar with the old YMCA building there at 8th and Armstrong. Just a few highlights of this project. Prairie Fire Development is going to be doing the renovations. Jared Nook and Rudy Maines are here in the audience if you all have any questions as we move along. The investment is approximately $9 million. They're using historic preservation tax credits on this. It is, you know, a building that's, I think, over 100 years old. This will be a senior living, and it's about 44 units, and will be mixed income, so anywhere from 30 to 80% of the area median income. And they're looking to start construction in September of 2019, and expect the project to be completed November 2020. What they have applied for is the Neighborhood Revitalization Property Tax Rebate Program. Now, they comply with all the policy eligibility, so this is a formality going through the commission, but because it is one of the larger projects, it does require commission approval. So even though it hits all the kind of requisite eligibility requirements. So it is, so just to kind of go through what those are, it is located in Area 1, which is a pretty large area. It's generally east of 635. This is a project that's greater than $3 million, so it is in this special project area. And it is also receiving a historic designation, so that puts it in its own kind of different group. So one of the things that this rebate program would do is, assuming that the assessed value increases by a minimum of 15%, which we certainly anticipate that it will raise by much more than that, then they will receive a 75% rebate. That can be increased by 10% if they comply with the LMW goals that have been set for this project, and it would last 20 years. So today, we are asking for approval of this resolution.
Any questions? Yes, Mr. McKiernan, please.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate this presentation. I want to just remind everybody that one of the things that they're asking for is a reduction of ongoing property tax to help finance the ultimate renovation of this historic building and to keep it as a non-blighting asset in our downtown that is affordable and available to seniors 55 plus. But it's important to remember that because the YMCA, for all the good work that they have done, was a not-for-profit organization, this building hasn't paid property taxes historically. So even with the rebate, this building will now pay thousands of dollars in additional taxes above and beyond what it has paid historically. So it becomes a tax-paying asset in the downtown, in addition to being clean, safe, and affordable places for our seniors 55 plus to live. So I would move that we approve.
Second.
I don't know we don't know yet. That will be once the way this works is that once the construction is complete, then the assessor or appraiser will go out and appraise the property. We anticipate, they'll be paying, or up to 85% will not be rebated. So I don't.
How did
know
we
what that
come up with that rebate number if we don't really know any of the numbers?
Well, it's all based on the assessed value.
I know it, yeah.
You can't assess a project until it's completed.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded to move this item forward to full commission approval. Any comments from the public? Let us be seen. Nobody step forward. This is an action item, so at this time, I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Mr. Chairman,
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, Commissioner Townsend.
I'm sorry, I guess it wasn't fast enough. They're asking for 20 year. Is this pretty much a standard period requested here for the rebate period?
Yeah, both the percentages and the time period are in the policy. So that's where these come from. I think that may.
As Commissioner said, this property was formerly not a taxable property, correct? Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Clerk, call roll.
Roll call, Bryant,
Aye.
Walters,
Aye.
Bynum,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye. That takes us to item number 5. In committee, I do want to remind you that we have Budgets Committee at 7 p.m. So we'll move forward with item number 5, and that is in reference to the Boulevard Lofts. And again, Catherine?
Thank you very much. Next. So the Boulevard Lofts, some of you may have attended the groundbreaking just a few weeks ago. This is a project that is located on Washington between 7th and 8th. The project is approximately $11 million of investment, 50 units of mixed income living. They're using affordable housing tax credits. It's about 80% of the units will be income restricted, while about 20 are market rate. Construction is commenced this month, and they're anticipating a project completion in the late summer of 2020. We believe, it's hard to know the exact time period, but we feel safe in saying that this is the first new multifamily development downtown in at least decades. Now, you may ask, why is this coming forward if they've already broken ground? And what happened was the Boulevard Lofts project, so they're receiving the tax credits from KHDC, or KHRC, sorry. So they had their rent set. So at this time, they're not receiving any assistance from the unified government. The KHRC approved a rent structure, and then as they were approaching closing, their investor said, ooh, hold on, I'm not sure these rents work because there are no comps. And this is one issue that we have in downtown because there are no new multifamily, we don't have many comparables or really any comparables for new construction, especially for market rate. So at the last minute, there is this shortfall in financing. BPU stepped up and awarded the project $250,000 from their Economic Development Fund. And they have requested that we assist and fill the remaining shortfall. So what we propose is only looking at the UG portion of property tax. So as we're moving forward, we're only talking about that 46% that in this location is city-county property tax. And this is all predicated on the idea that there are different rents, that you've got the investor-approved rents and the KHRC-approved rents. I have been told by Prairie Fire and CHWC that they still anticipate that this will get the rents that they think it should. But due to financing, they need to show that that gap is, potentially filled if the worst happens and the investor is correct, which we don't think they are. But so if the investor is correct and we're just looking at annual gross rent, I've got lots of spreadsheets I can show you if you're interested. If they are not getting the rent that the investor anticipated, then they'll get 100% reimbursement of that UG portion. Now, if you kind of skip down to if they are getting what they anticipated and or more, then they will receive a reimbursement of 50%. And if they're somewhere in between, it would be 75%. And we're put a cap on 10 years and $200,000 of reimbursable project costs. They have LMW goals, and so that's all factored in. So because they will be getting some amount of reimbursable rent, we obviously want to know what they'd be using it for. And so this will actually allow them to not only make sure that they are getting the financing that they need to continue on the project, which is great for us because, again, we have no multifamily market rate comparables, and we're anticipating that there already is a lot of interest in building additional market rate in the downtown area. And so this project will actually go a long way to proving what that market is, because right now there just isn't a number that investors and banks can look at. So that's a big benefit to us. And then additionally, they're going to be doing some things kind of above and beyond their original project, doing some public alley improvements as well as some cleanup. So I would ask if you have any questions and ask that you approve this ordinance.
Any questions?
I have a question. Have we entered into any other kind of agreement where we've guaranteed this kind of incentive?
Commissioner, the Honda dealer out by the Legends has a very similar structure where we reimburse them through the property tax payments.
Based on?
So the developer certifies certain costs that they incurred for the improvements. We certify those costs, and then we use the property tax payments that they made to reimburse them for certain costs. So it's very similar to that structure, just on a much smaller scale than the one for Honda.
If you were to say that if they sold so many cars, they would pay this much tax, but if they didn't sell that many cars, we would forego their property tax, I would think that would be more similar. We didn't do anything like that, did we?
I don't think so, no.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bynum?
It sounds like a TIF.
All of these where you're looking at, that increase in property tax, and whether it's a rebate or a redirection or an abatement, they are all kind of related. I think the difference with this is purely because of these kind of unique circumstances that this project found themselves in. We really are trying to make sure that we're solely filling that gap that is necessary and not more.
And Commissioner, as opposed to a TIF, we're only using the county and Kansas City, Kansas portion. That's why we're designating it as a home rule ordinance.
Thank you.
And just one thing that I wanted to point out, these were mostly land bank lots before, correct?
Correct.
So similar to the other project, we were not getting property tax revenue from these on an ongoing basis. So even at a discounted rate, this property will now pay hundreds or thousands of dollars of additional taxes based on our historic precedent.
That is correct.
So we are going to be bringing at least some additional tax revenue, in addition to having the amenity of having the new affordable housing for folks in the downtown area.
And I apologize, I have some numbers with me, but I do have, it won't be exact, but I do have estimated numbers of what they're anticipating that their property tax would be and what this would look like.
And a reminder of this one, as well as the Y project, you're talking, I can't remember how many there will be here. There was 44, I believe, in the other one.
Yep, this one's 50.
All right, so there's 94 utility bills that'll be paid that all have pilot attached to them, which is a tax that comes in to the city, so it is revenue for the city. So I'm not striking against the pilot, I'm saying that there will be additional revenue beyond property tax.
That's accurate.
Was Commissioner Townsend, did you have a question?
Yeah, I might be confusing myself. We just gave authorization for, is it the same project? No, okay, all right, that's part of the confusion.
YMCA is at 8th and Armstrong, and this one's at 8th and Washington.
Okay, all right, that's part of the never mind then, that's.
Move approval.
Second.
I would like to state that we're, just for clarification, we're taking action on the ordinance to allow the resolution to move forward. Is that correct, staff?
Yes, you're voting on a resolution that would authorize the adoption of the development agreement that authorizes this structure, so that the reimbursement structure is contained within the development agreement. And so the vote tonight is to whether to authorize that development agreement, which has the structure in it.
Might I make a suggestion, Ms. Carter? Next time we have a new program that's being brought forward to the committee, that there be an education process so that we fully understand, is that $200,000 a cap?
Yes.
Total?
Total.
More than $200,000?
Correct.
And we approved an ordinance last month, if I remember correctly, to move this forward, but yet we find out the project is still underfunded and needing assistance through economic incentive from the home rule.
I mean, this is the first time you've seen anything about Boulevard lofts, is tonight.
Okay, then I must be mistaken. I thought we approved the Boulevard Loft project because we had a groundbreaking. It had to have been approved sometime.
There was no, I mean, been no public assistance provided until BPU, so it has not gone through. It may have.
It would have gone through the planning.
It's gone through
Oh,
planning.
planning. So it had
We've
the
seen it
zoning.
as a planning action item.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I just wanted to ensure that this committee has all of the information necessary so we understand the incentive packages. And I do appreciate the questions that came forward from committee, because it's important that we as commissioners understand if we're not accepting revenue off of a project, but we're giving that revenue back for investment, that we that we are able to communicate to the public as to why their taxes are going up and others are getting a tax break. Thank you. A motion been made and seconded as an action. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Just one more point of clarification. On this item, the entity bringing it forward, is anticipating not having enough in rental. Just run that by me again. And I think, Mr. Chairman, do we call for comment from the public?
I plan on doing that just
Okay.
prior to taking the clerk's roll call vote.
All right.
Is there a member of the public who would like to speak to this?
After Ms. Carter addresses my question. Thank
So
you.
basically, they are anticipating that they will not need, there may be some ramp-up period is likely, but Prairie Fire and CHWC believe that they will get the rents that they anticipate, and they're, kind of hoping that their investor was not correct. And so I think it is safe to say that the likelihood is, they probably will not reach that $200,000 cap. That's just kind of there was a rhyme and reason for it, but hopefully they will receive the rents that they anticipate, and so their gap will be less, and thus we will reimburse them less.
And so, heaven forbid that they not receive the rents that they anticipate. If this is approved as proposed, for the duration of that project?
Just a maximum of 10 years and $200,000.
Maximum of 10 years. All right, thank you.
At this time, I would ask if a member of the public has any comments they'd care to make on this issue. Yes, ma'am, if you'll approach the microphone, you have 3 minutes. Give your name and address. And welcome.
Thank you. My name is Naja Khalil. I live at 1816 North 92nd Terrace, Kansas City, Kansas, 66112. Okay, and my question was, these proposals that you're having for these facilities in this area, I mean, who's going to live there? And what incentive are you having for people to move in these areas? So, I mean, it's not looking good as far as where the family people would like to live in this area at this time. So I'm just wondering if there's some incentive or something that we don't know about that's going to allow people to want to take advantage of this situation.
Just Carter.
So these are, it's a mix of, I don't like having my back to you. It's a mix of income levels. So there are some income restricted, so depending on what your income is, that your rent would be reflective of that. So depending on how much you make, you might be paying less rent or more rent, depending. So that's an incentive. And then I know at least for the Boulevard Lofts, it is open to anyone, so pre-leasing starts May of 2020.
Okay, so my main question, I guess, is, not me per se, but why would I want to live in this area?
Because it's a wonderful area. Yeah, it's a wonderful area. Why wouldn't you want to live here?
It is a wonderful area?
Yeah, got a lot's happening. We've got a grocery store opening downtown.
Is it a grocery store that's going to be opening here? I mean, everything that's user-friendly to the, to residents.
Take that.
It's sort of like at the Legends or somewhere else, whatever. So you're going to be like commuting back and forth to get your stable stuff, unless you guys know of something that's coming in the area. I mean, like, I don't know, a Sprouts or something, I don't know. That's just a question.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
We do have a motion and a second. This is an action item. I'd ask clerk call roll, please.
Roll call. Bryant?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Burrows?
Aye. We have four more items. We are up against 7:15. We do have Budget Committee. Staff, what do you propose we do at this time?
I think we need to continue on. The meeting's been called.
We can do this.
Will be as fast as possible.
Okay.
Item number 6 is update on the small business program, recommended amendments to the UG Small Business Grant Program. We have Shayla Lockett, our small business liaison, will provide an update. Ms. Lockett, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Shaya Lockett, and I will try to move through quickly. But we wanted to come before you to give you an update on the small businesses. When I was last before this committee in January, we were beginning the process of getting software so we could begin tracking the data regarding the businesses that I've been working with. We received that software at the end of January and began our input at the beginning of February. Since that time, I've met with 48 different businesses, and I do want to state that they're not all businesses that are currently in operation. Those include people who have called inquiring about how to obtain a business license and things of that nature. The number of people, some of the businesses have more than one point of contact, and that's kept in there as well. And over the last 30 days, I've spoke with 21 of those businesses, maybe a short question, a meeting, and things of that nature. The primary areas of assistance with these businesses have been assisting them navigate the unified government departments, so making sure they are put in touch with the right department that can assist them with their needs, referring them to external resource partners if they have a question regarding something that we don't cover at the unified government, but we know another agency that can assist them. And then also networking with entrepreneur-based organizations as we try to build the ecosystem of small businesses here in Kansas City, Kansas. Also, at that January meeting, I mentioned we would be starting our new initiative entitled WICO Loves Local. And we're excited to announce the new initiative to support local small businesses, WICO Loves Local. The initiative is created in order to encourage continued growth and support of small businesses in Wyandotte County. WICO Loves Local will celebrate the success and diversity of businesses in Wyandotte County. Over the past year in working with the small businesses, one of the biggest obstacles that businesses have mentioned is their need for assistance with marketing, and this is one of the ways we felt as a government agency we could assist them by encouraging the support of local businesses within the community. We launched a logo design contest in which we asked high school seniors to design a logo for this new initiative, and we explained it to them. Macy Ortega, who is a junior at Piper High School, was our winner, and that winner was selected by our NBRs and other partnering organizations that work closely with small businesses. The goals of WICO Loves Local is to connect businesses to small business resources so that we can help them continue to grow. To also connect our residents to local attractions, there are a lot of smaller businesses that many residents are not familiar with, but this also helps drive those residents to those local attractions. And then also in talking with the Convention and Visitors Bureau, it will help us introduce tourists to the unique businesses and organizations of Wyandotte County. Our first phase of rollout is to begin with a highlight via social media. The businesses have an opportunity to complete an application submitted to the Small Business Liaison, and that will allow them to promote their business via social media. They have the opportunity to offer a special during that promotion that if people mention that ad, they can get 10% off or whatever special they choose. There are certain criteria that they must meet. They must be current on their taxes, no current code violations, and they must have a current business license in order to be highlighted through the program. Our goal is to eventually take our next step for WICO Loves Local is to do something similar to the Portland Buy Local campaign, which will create a map of local businesses and we'll be able to search them by category so that any resident of Wyandotte County or even a neighboring community, if they're looking for a tire shop in Wyandotte County, they can find a local tire shop to patronize, and then that allows us to continue to support those smaller businesses in our area. And just as Wyco Loves Local has been we're hoping that Wyco Loves Local can be just as instrumental as our small business grant. And so tonight, I also wanted to give an update on the small business grant, as well as recommend changes to the grant program. And just to give you an update, the 2018 grantees were Big Grill and More, KCK Dental Professionals, Union Press, Dolores Holmes Training Center, and Miguel's Catering. So far for 2019, we have awarded 2 grants to Slabs Barbecue and Split Log Coffee, and there are 2 pending applications that I'm just waiting on additional documentations to finalize those processes. And if those are approved, we will have $10,000 remaining for the rest of the year.
Ms. Lockett, what is the total amount of money available for grants? Do we have a budget item set aside for grants? What is that total?
$50,000.
$50,000. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so these are the changes that we're recommending to the grant. We want it to be a 50-50 match. There isn't currently a requirement for that, but I think it puts businesses in a better position to be able to get the equipment and the materials that they need. And we also are changing the amount that they can apply for. They can apply for an amount from anywhere between $1,000 to $10,000. Currently, it's set that they can only apply for $2,500, $5,000, or $10,000. So if you have a piece of equipment that's in that mid-range, you either have to ask for less money, which can be a struggle for a smaller business, or you're asking for more money and trying to find a way to spend that money. So we want to make it as beneficial to the business as possible, and that's going to be based on the need and a qualified matching investment. And I do want to point out that it still will be reimbursable. So they still have to spend the funds first, and then we will reimburse the grant back to them. Previously, the funding was through the IRB issuance fees. Now it's funded through the general operating budget of economic development for that $50,000 annually. One change is we will no longer cover lease rate subsidies. We want the businesses to be in good standing and moving to the next level of business growth. And what we found is helping with equipment and things like that help promote the business growth and help their bottom line a little more than us covering lease rate subsidies. The grant also will not require the applicant to hire an additional employees, and this is simply for tracking purposes. It's difficult for us to go back and track whether or not they've actually hired the additional employees that they said they would. We are removing payday loans, hookah, and vape shops. They'll be added to the list of businesses that are excluded. But we are making an amendment to allow sites with federal and state license for production and distribution of alcohol so that they can be able to apply. It still will exclude bars and establishments that sell alcohol with less than 50% of food sales. And this is due to the changes in the laws regarding microbreweries. We also would like to break the grant into 2 cycles, and we would review, the first cycle deadline will be April 1st, and the second will be August 1st, and it will be $25,000 each cycle. And all applications will be reviewed at the end of the cycle deadline, and we're proposing that the business, once the grant is approved, they have 18 months timeframe to use the funds. We are creating a program advisory committee, and I do want to make an amendment to this. We will just have unified government representatives that will serve on this advisory committee since it will be allocating the unified government funds. And our recommendations from this committee will be made to the county administrator for approval or denial based on their alignment with the unified government goals. And that's it. Any questions?
Any questions from committee members? Commissioner Townsend?
Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Lockett. I'd like to go back to some of your earlier snapshots that show changes, and just kind of go through a couple of questions I have. In trying to increase small business and helping them to expand, how is it that requiring a match helps that process? When we started this program, if people had those kinds of funds to start with, they wouldn't be coming to us. So how is this an improvement or aid those small businesses that are trying to grow and expand?
One of the things, the business has to have the funds to purchase the equipment to begin with, but by changing it to a 50-50 match, it increases their investment into the project as well, and it's allowing them, for instance, I'll use a business that's looking for marketing, for assistance with marketing. A lot of businesses, they have some funds available to them to do that, but maybe not to the level that they are wanting to. And this allows them to increase their ability to market the project. Or they may have $5,000 for some equipment, but they don't have the full $10,000. And this allows them to purchase that equipment that will increase their production as a business to be able to continue to move forward.
If some of those businesses have a certain amount of money, but not all that they need, that's great for them. The problem I see is that this, my opinion, would be an impediment, not a help. If someone is already existing, they've made some significant investment because they're an ongoing concern already. They need help, they're trying to grow. My personal opinion is that this may be an impediment. I would not want to see that. The other question I have, let's see, was about the timing. What is the benefit to small businesses or this cutoff that's being proposed? If you could go, I guess, advance.
To the cycles?
Yeah. What's the benefit to businesses of that?
Well, we found,
And limiting, I'm sorry, only 25,000 each cycle.
well, the 25,000 each cycle is, is based off of the amount that we're budgeted each year. What we found at the end of last year, and if these two grant applications go through that are pending, is that come the end of the year, there may be businesses that could use the funds but aren't able to apply for them because all the money is already allocated. So by changing it to a two-cycle period, it allows all the businesses to submit the applications and to be reviewed. And by changing the amount, they don't have to apply for the $10,000. They don't have to apply for $5,000. They can apply for just the amount that they need.
Okay, I'm perplexed by that because that seems contrary to the limitations or what we've said already about how much they have to apply for. I'm not following that, just because.
They can apply for anywhere between $1,000 and $10,000. So the real purpose of this is to be that kind of gap financing, to do something that will move your company forward or your business forward in a more rapid pace. So, we've seen some, a catering company that needs the nicer oven or, things like that, that it's overwhelming and not possible for a company by itself. So we're also hoping that by making it a match, another thing I would mention is we are removing the additional employee requirement. And I think the reason that was put in place was to show that company was kind of putting some skin in the game. The problem with that is that even if we're giving you the max $10,000, that's not enough to hire an employee. So it ended up being that was the real, I think, burden and impediment to a business. So we're hoping that with a match and removing that requirement for additional employment, that we're actually kind of right-sizing, people will actually apply for the amount that they need and for a very specific purpose.
Okay, so again, just so I'm clear, so anyone can apply, an applicant can apply for anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 in those, within those timeframes?
Yes.
So that's the most anyone can get is 10,000.
That's not changing. That was consistent.
I do like the fact that you've removed this requirement for another person, because I think, as I'd mentioned before when this came up, the improvement that the business may need may not really require another body anyway.
Right.
So there again, that was an impediment, I thought, to it. So the other thing, and I've said this before, if people had the wherewithal to put the money up front, a lot of these businesses would not be coming to us in the first place. I can think of a couple that we did early on that are thriving today, but if we insist that they pay, and then basically you're having us pay a receipt for money they've expended, most of these businesses don't have that. I think that's an impediment and should be removed. Just my thoughts. Thank you.
Any other comments from the committee? Any member of the audience care to comment? Seeing none, this is an action item. I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve as submitted.
Motion been made and seconded. I would ask the clerk to call roll.
Roll call, Bryant,
Aye.
Walters. Aye. Bynum,
Aye.
Townsend,
I'm sorry, no.
McKiernan,
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye. Thank you. That takes us to item number 7. That is the development agreement for the Kansas City Foodie Park Logistics Center, known as the former Indian Springs site. And I will wait just a moment while our conferees get up here. And Catherine, you will be directing the discussion, is my understanding.
Indeed, I will. Once again, Catherine Carter, Economic Development. This is an exciting project, and I'm joined by some of our illustrious attorneys in town. Todd Lazala from Stinson, who works with us on our side, and then Kurt Peterson from Polsinelli, who is representing Scavuzzo's. So just quickly, and Kurt, feel free to jump in whenever, but just a little bit about Scavuzzo's. They've almost 100 years old. They've been in Kansas City. They're currently in KCK on Kansas Avenue. So we're excited to be able to work with a company that has such strong roots in Kansas City and is excited and really wants to invest in KCK as they move forward in the future of their company. They distribute food primarily to restaurants. They're in 8 states, I believe, as I could figure out on their website, and growing. So just a few kind of project highlights, and maybe I'll pass this to Kurt to go through.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I know, my name's Kurt Peterson again, and I know you all have heard this either once or twice or even more. Some of you, I'm looking around, I know you were at the neighborhood meeting. Many of you were at, all of you were at the planning process where we came through both the preliminary and final plans. So with that, and knowing that you're tight on time, you can slow me down, but I will be efficient because I know you've seen this several times. So what you see on your screen is the approximately, in the green at least, is approximately 50-acre site, which was Indian Springs. Scavuzzo's have a vision to make this a foodie campus. As you've heard before, it's a vision they're dedicated to, have been for more than a year, and working with the UG. Through the incentive process, we will divide the site into phases, which would start on the bookends. That would be it's hard because the site, trying to fit it on the screen, is rotated, but what's labeled as the Renewable Energy Center there on your left is to the south, down towards I-70 in that direction. And then to the north would be State Avenue. And so I'll start on the north side and just quickly remind you of what's on here. The far north side would be, we'd call kind of the first row for restaurants, we hope, and retail. Scavuzzo's clients are largely local and regional restaurants that they wholesale take everything that a restaurant needs and bring it to their facility and then deliver it on a very personal way to those restaurants as they need those items. And so with that, they have many, many deep, long-standing, this is a fifth-generation company here in Kansas City, and have long-standing relationships with, again, especially local and regional restaurants. And so up in that first row, what's labeled as Project Area 2 on the screen, now we're properly oriented to the north at the top, would be really focusing on those restaurants, which we're out in the market doing right now, and possibly some other retail, possibly a high-end C-store or something like that. As you move to the south, you would get to Project Area 3. That is, sometimes we call it, in short, the second row. This could be a mix of everything from grocery-related to food service-related businesses, such as food preparation with delivery services, and just a whole host of other things we've talked to professional staff about. It could even have some multifamily. It's really, it's a flexible area, really the most flexible for the entire 50-acre site. You moved next to the Project Area 4. This is where Scavuzzo's will put their new headquarters building, anticipated to be about a 4-story building, probably 60,000 feet more or less, with Scavuzzo's. And what's exciting is some of their other clients that have shown interest in coming and basing their restaurant, office, headquarters location there with them to co-locate. So that's in a nutshell what that project area is. And then lastly, you get to the south, which is Project Area 1. And this is referred to as the Food Service Center. This is where this amazing automated building will be built that will house all of Scavuzzo's really storage and distribution operations. And in terms of timing, it would be the bookends, as we told the neighbors at the neighborhood meeting, and are sticking to that plan, to be this southern phase, the Food Service Center that was just on the screen, and the southern portion there, and then also Project Area 2 up on State Avenue, which we're absolutely dedicated to. I mean, that's the face, right? That's what everybody sees and the neighborhood sees on State Avenue. So those are the two that we want to get going as fast as possible. In terms of timing, public incentives have always been part of this proposal from the beginning. This is where that process actually starts with you officially. So tax increment financing exclusively for infrastructure and site development, so horizontal work, and then community improvement district sales tax on sales that would happen within the 50 acres. That would also be for infrastructure and also some other hard cost construction. And then the final piece of the requested public-private partnership would be sales tax exemption for the larger portions of the project through industrial revenue bonds, no property tax abatement, just exemption on sales tax associated with construction materials. And with that, back to timing, because that's what both the public and I assume the leaders here in this room want to know, this is really the last big hurdle from an approval standpoint, because we're ready to go again on the Food Service Center with permit drawings into the UG. And so really getting this process done, which if all goes as requested and planned, would be going to the full commission this month after this meeting, coming back before you in August, and then finally going to an end of August full commission meeting. With that, the public incentives, by and large, there's always other little follow-on details, by and large would be, we would hope, approved, and we are ready to get going. That's what our lenders are asking for us to get started, to have that done. And with that, being sensitive to timing, there's more to talk about, but that's the high points, Chairman.
I'll just add a few items. So one of the actions requested, so the next three items in your agenda are all related to this project. But the ordinance to terminate the 2007 Midtown TIF project plan. So this area that you can see here, plus a little more, was the Midtown TIF that was put in place back in 2007. This was for projects that never actually materialized, so it has not actually been put into place. I mean, the district has been. What part of what we're asking tonight is to actually terminate the existing TIF plan and then replace it with a new project plan that is what Kurt outlined with those new projects that will materialize, if we have anything to say about it. Just a few other items regarding the financing. So we are looking to have a TIF. A lot about the financing, we're making sure that kind of in each phase there are very specific timing. This is not just kind of you've got 20 years to kind of do this. We have very specific timing for each of those four phases. An example is because of the very strong importance of the retail on State Avenue. That is very directly tied to the, both the TIF and the CID proceeds. So if they don't, if the developer does not do what they said they're going to do and do those minimum improvements on State Avenue, then that actually affects what they would get kind of on the back end from some of the other proceeds that they would anticipate. Same with the Community Improvement District. We're looking at a 1% on that for all retail sales. And then also just want to mention that the developer is, there are participation goals for this project, as well as I mentioned, there's very specific timing requirements for the start and completion of construction, and they are all tied to the accessibility of incentive funding. And then last but not least, the TIF formation, as you all know, I like to give you an update if you're going to see me a lot on one specific project, and this is one of those. So this is just a snapshot of all the times that I'll be coming in front of you to talk about different portions of this TIF. So we are just in those first two bubbles. Hopefully we'll get those checked off soon. Any questions?
Questions, committee. Mr. Bryant.
So the, you know what the plans are for the site at 65th and Kansas Avenue? It happens to be right down the street from my day job. And that building sat empty for just a short period after Earp left, and it sounds like it's going to sit empty again.
Well, I have several members of SCVUZAs with me that may be able to elaborate if we need to, but what I do know is we're a tenant there now. So if that was one of the things to resolve in your mind, we don't own the building, so it won't be sold to someone else. It'll be the same owner. And I don't know if we know exactly what's going to happen next. Yeah, not our building, so I'm sorry, we don't have an answer for that.
What's the total build-out time for the completed project if it was to be completed to total fruition? What's the build-out time?
Sure. The last deadline, Commissioner, is December 31st of 2026 for full build-out.
Okay. Commissioner Walters, you had a question?
Yes, I did. I have to say that reading this development agreement, the project described here is not nearly as exciting as the project that I've been, that we've been presented over the past several months. So I just have some questions. So I understand your phase one will be a warehouse, and it will be started fairly immediately, and it will be completed by December 31st of 2021. But the next phase, the State Avenue pad site developments, which we really don't know anything about other than they're going to be retail, entertainment, or restaurant uses. I believe you just said it might be a high-end C-store. That's really my fear. But that's not committed to being completed until December 31st of 2022. So for the near term, it's going to be a warehouse site. The next phase, phase three, which I picked up during previous presentations, is really kind of what makes it a foodie, the foodie court. That's not going to be committed to be developed until 2025. So it's really not going to be a foodie court for a long time, at least as I see described in this development agreement. And then the office building comes in 2026, though it says right in here that we still incentivize it, even if it's 5 years late, completed in December 31st of 2031. So that timeline really makes this not nearly as exciting and transformational as I had kind of hoped. I do have some more specific questions about this TIF reimbursement cap. It says here that the TIF cap begins at $11 million, and then it increases to $19 million after the completion of Phase 2.
That's correct.
Phase 2 is, there's only a commitment to spend $3 million on Phase 2, but the cap goes up $8 million? Could you explain that to me?
Sure. I would tell you that there is real emphasis put on those State Avenue pad sites in this development agreement. It is, you're right, it may seem disproportionate, but it is heavily incentivized because it's important to the UG, important to the neighborhood. So there is access to TIF revenue that is available from Project Area 1, the distribution center. We disproportionately reduced the amount of TIF that was available to that and really shared some of that with Project Area 2 because it was that important. So philosophically, that's what's going on there. You're not wrong at all, but that's where the discussion came from.
But if if a Burger King and a McDonald's and a high-end C-store are built, they've satisfied their requirements in this.
If it's 12,000 square feet and $3 million of investment, that's correct.
That's all we're.
Those are minimum thresholds. I think their ambition may be more than that, but those are the minimum contractual requirements.
I guess I'm kind of wondering why we agreed to such minimum requirements. Does staff have any ideas on that?
Well, I would say that a lot of these, if you're looking at the minimum requirements as well as the timing, these are, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, they are the absolute minimum required. And in terms of also with the timing, we're also setting a parameters, as kind of late as kind of feasible for both sides. So part of this is always making sure that we want to ensure that this project gets done and there is retail out there. And so, setting up Scavuzzo's to succeed and hopefully greatly exceed expectations is what we've have organized this to do.
I guess my last question. So I guess we've agreed to sell this 50 acres for $400. Do you know anything about the land value for the warehousing that is being built a couple miles west at the Turner Diagonal?
No, it's more than $400.
I mean, I guess my question is, if they can pay market rate for that land and develop a warehouse on spec and expect to make money, why would we give this valuable piece of Wyandotte County away for $400?
I mean, I think we see this as much more than a distribution project. I mean, that is one component, but fundamentally, this is a mixed-use project that will bring 60,000 square feet of office space at a minimum, retail space, and, I think very likely potentially some multifamily or other kind of foodie, kind of food companies.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. McKierney.
I was just going to say, again, I'm sensitive, hopefully respect the timing here, but that Mr. Walters, who can hold whatever opinion he likes and can characterize any project how he wants, that was it seemed like a fairly pessimistic view of the project. And so I at least, if you let me, Chairman, try to, for a minute or two, because some folks in the audience, that will be all that they'll ever hear about the project.
I would encourage you to do so.
Thank you. Good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it seems like if I had to distill down, Commissioner Walters, what you're saying, it didn't seem like you felt as though development required the substance of what you'd like and the timing for what you like, trying to.
I'm really referring to the development agreement.
Right. Yep. Got it.
I understand the flowery pictures, but I'm just trying to respond to this.
Sure. That's right. And I'm hearing you loud and clear. So to address that, I think one, just for folks that have followed along all the way back to the neighborhood meeting, we have not changed one bit what we've proposed as the vision here for the foodie park. It was the same more than a year ago, and it's the same today. And in terms of needing flexibility as to exactly what uses go where, Scavuzzo's are putting all their eggs in this basket. This company, again, has been around for more than a century, and they're putting their name on this site, the whole site, not just the food service center on the southern end. They care about every single pad that is sold. Again, this is their brand. They're branding the whole site, Scavuzzo's. This is their company. They plan to be here a really long time. And so right now, and we don't have time to go into this, but on State Avenue, with respect to those pads that are so important to everybody, that's what we heard at the neighborhood meeting. That's what the feedback survey from 2.5 years ago said. We really care about neighborhood retail. So there has been so much work already, even though we don't, kind of out front, right? It's not our land. We don't have a development agreement, but we've been out telling people that, but working with local restaurants. There is tons of interest, but it's hard. A lot of these companies can't afford to pay rent, right? If it was an easy process, somebody probably would have approached you with some pretty pictures and already done it. But we absolutely are committed to it. We put our money where our mouth is. That's why all these incentives are tied to producing under a certain timetable. And so we are absolutely devoted to getting the kind of retail that and restaurants that you'll be proud of at this site, but it takes a lot of work. So going to the timing, why do we leave ourselves approximately 3 years to get State Avenue done? Not because we don't already have, again, we could get in the details, but I think 7 or 8 pretty strong leads. I mean, shoe leather is happening, a lot of work on that. But to find the right mix, we don't want to be rushed into it, and you don't want us to be rushed into it. We don't want to just take the first tenant that probably can pay rent. We want to take the best tenants and have time to get it done. So that's an outside date, as Catherine and Todd said. We don't want to fail, you don't want us to fail, I don't think. And so it's a healthy period. Do we plan to take that long? I absolutely hope not, but we all felt like that was probably what we should set out there to make sure we get the best mix. As to why we left ourselves time to go to phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, and it stretches whatever that exact amount was, 6+ years, because there's a huge investment that has to happen to take this very, very physically troubled site. Tons and tons, millions of dollars of site work that has to be done upfront on the spec. And it only pencils, as there's a full economic analysis that shows this, it only pencils with public-private partnership, and that's why we're here. And if we go to our lender and say, will you help us as we put in some of our equity, and we ask you, lender, to put in some money, and the lender says, okay, show me your development, how does this work? And there's super tight timeframes that the lender thinks might not be achievable, we're not going to get a loan. We don't get a loan, we can't pull off this deal. So some of what you see in those, I'd say, solid, generous time periods don't indicate how long the Scavuzzo's think it's likely it will take, but if you don't do it, you will never get the financing. So I could go on and on, but I just wanted to hit a few of those points. We are super excited about the content here, the substance of what's going on this site. It absolutely will take time, whether it's Scavuzzo's or somebody else that would come along. Yes, sir.
Any other comments? Commissioner McCarty?
Thank you very much. Could you go back to the CID slide, please? I have 2 big things that are causing me some heartburn right now. One is the CID. The CID is going to depend on phase 2, right?
Yes. Yes.
Which means that there's going to be no revenue in this CID for how many years?
Well, if they took all the time, it wouldn't start until December 31st of 2022.
And you've built your pro forma based on no revenue out of Project Area 2 until that time?
When the pro forma shows businesses coming online, both in, try to get Project Area 2 and then Project Area 3 just south of that, then it shows this, based on the sales for that building, it shows the 1% CID sales tax, and that's how the pro forma
And keep in mind that CID is not like TIF where you have to start the day that you approve. You can set a date to start collection a couple years out.
That's very correct, but we are, speculating is not the right word, but we are estimating how much sales, at what time, because that gives us then the basis on which we're going to take this 1% and apply it toward project costs. And I'm concerned. And frankly, I would like to see in a little bit more detail what we're anticipating in terms of the timing of these and how much money we're estimating is going to go in to all of these things. And the other thing that really does cause me some concern here is the land sale price. I think Commissioner Walters is entirely correct that although this particular site has been vacant for some period of time. There are other sites that are similarly vacant that have recently sold for much more than this and are being converted into very productive developments that I believe even have a little bit of a pilot built into them. So there's an escalating pilot built in so that we are getting just a little bit something off of this land. Now, granted, we did not own that particular land, but it is land. And one of the things that I'd like to know is, and I'm almost inclined to say that I'd like to see a little bit more and talk a little bit more about this before I take a final vote on it, but I'd like to know what room do we have in terms of this sale price of this land? It has been vacant, but it's prime land in a prime location. And so I would just like to feel better that this is in our best interest to set that sale price and then move forward for what I'm confident will be a very productive and very useful development. I'm confident. I just have a couple of qualms about the financing going in.
So the only thing I will say, and we can certainly provide additional projections on the revenues and all that, but just in terms of one of the things that makes this land particularly challenging as opposed to, for example, the Turner Diagonal where North Point is going, is all of the community interest and input, which is excellent, but it makes this, we were very aware that when looking for a company to partner with, as we develop this property, that it would not just be a industrial park, that this really needed to be a mixed-use site and providing direct benefits to the neighbors, and especially with retail in the situation it is currently, that's a tougher sell than you would anticipate.
I would just say those are much different projects, entirely different. In fact, others that have proposed something similar to that here were not supported. So this is, looking at this as just the food service center would be missing by far, the Scavuzes would say, the whole vision. And nobody, I'm not saying anybody here is missing the vision, but I would just caution to make sure that the full picture is looked at, because this isn't about just a food service center.
So if I could follow back up, then the vision here is to start with Project Area 1 and use it as the slingshot to make sure that 2 and 3 and hopefully 4 will go after that?
And if they didn't, then this development agreement, I was going to say holds the feet to the fire, incinerates the feet of the developer.
That's right. It is, this one is not like some other development agreements we've done over the years where Phase 3 and Phase 4 are optional. It's not that. There are clawbacks, there are penalties attached to not completing Phase 4. It is truly a mixed-use project from that perspective.
And so really that is the vision here, is that this maybe less neighborhood-oriented Phase 1 is the driving force that runs 2, 3, and 4, which then will be turned over to the benefit of the neighborhood and surrounding.
Family planting their flag is just another way to say that, right in the beginning, putting all their eggs right there on the south side, and again, having to put their money where their mouth is. On the land sale, that's interesting, because that hasn't been talked about, at least for a while, on the staff side, and I think, and staff will speak for themselves, but I believe when that stopped, because initially before we traded pro formas and everything, there was plenty of talk about what the land's going to cost. And once we put our detailed financial pro forma with and without the public-private partnership, and it was scrutinized by staff, and it was seen that this isn't Turner Diagonal or whatever other project we want to compare to, this is tight, but these folks aren't here just to make a buck and flip. This is where they're putting their headquarters. They'll take a lower return, but they can't lose money. That's how we backed into the $100, whatever the nominal sale price for the land. That is exactly how we arrived at it. It was a process.
Thank you.
Thank you. I must admit I had some pause when I saw what both my fellow commissioners have already identified with what was the cost or the sale price. So that does give me some concern. I know this has been challenging, and we've had people look for it. We're happy that someone wants it, but that is of some concern. I'd like to look at that some more, or digest it some more, something. The other question, or the other issue, and I'm not sure where it is in here, or that it's in here at all, but if this project moves forward, will the UG have any input in terms of a thumbs up or thumbs down on any of the other vendors that come in?
So we have put a restriction, a radius restriction, so there are a number of, in particular, fast food restaurants on state, fairly proximate to this project. We have put a radius restriction to ensure that, your, let's say McDonald's, does not just build a brand-new building at this location and then leaves their other location empty. So they are not permitted to put a business, a restaurant or a business that is within, I believe, a mile from that location.
There are also restrictions in the, though you're not approving tenant by tenant, is also a restrictions section, Commissioner, in 7.2 that goes item by item against some of the more noxious uses you might fear, including hookah bars and payday loan facilities and flea markets, precious metals facilities, stores and businesses that use street marketing, and the guy with the sandwich board out on the street. So there is a section that is entirely focused on things that you just can't do.
Could you direct me, Counselor, to the page on that for those uses?
Sure. It's on page 20, starts on page 26 of your development agreement, 7.2.
What was that page again?
26, 7.2C, and you'll start seeing a whole bunch of Romanettes. One, any use that's offensive by reason of odor. Number two is a car wash, unless, and to the extent they do it in connection with a C-store. And you'll see there a list of, 20, let's see. Well, an awful lot. 26 uses that are restricted.
Okay.
It carries over all the way to page 28.
Great. So those by type of business are excluded.
Correct.
But what about the UG's opportunity to analyze, comment on, give a thumbs up or down on something not on this list that may come? Because even though that's not in my district, it borders that district, and some of my constituents had very strong opinions about what might be there, particularly retail.
We do have also, and I won't know, N.
Exhibit.
Oh, Exhibit N. So some of the minimum requirements have to be in certain categories, as you can see here. So we are looking for that you really hit those minimum requirements with very high quality retail, and then if you go above and beyond that, then you can kind of mix and match. But we're making sure that there is that kind of minimum level of quality for the minimum requirement.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at, though, is if this development agreement is approved, let's say 2 years in the subsequent phases from now, there's a proposal for a particular type of restaurant, eat-in restaurant. Will that be totally Scavulo's call, or will the UG have input into
The former.
coming or not?
The former. We talk about assignment and the UG's role in approving sales and leases and so forth in all of these, but as is the case in most of our development agreements, the UG does not have the right or the ability to micromanage which hamburger place they would pick, or Scavuzzo's is going to be able to do that on their own. As what we really do with the development agreement on Exhibit N for Project Area 3 for the whole site in that restrictions section I was pointing to, is we really give them parameters and say, you can go do the leasing for this project on your own as long as you stay within the parameters. This development agreement would not give the UG the right to, Kurt would probably say, micromanage their leasing activity in picking which tenant goes on which site. We do not get to do that here. And frankly, we haven't done a lot of development agreements where we have done that in retail centers where a developer wants to go out and put some money in and take some risks. There are precious few that would let us ride sidecar and decide you can pick this tenant or that tenant. We haven't done a lot of that.
We did. If Rich Scavuzzo was here, who you may remember, he's the CEO and has been at every single meeting we've had on this project for over a year. And then, of course, long before this meeting was scheduled, he was scheduled to be out of town. So Pam Scavuzzo is here, and Amy Scavuzzo, respectively, the president and owner and the finance director are here. But Rich would be grabbing the mic right now, if you met him, and he'd be saying, I am telling you that we're fine. We've been fine taking all these restrictions and parameters, as Todd said, because you have to trust me, and I'll tell you why there's teeth and not just trust. You have to trust me. We will not let this happen. And what's different about this project than just a developer saying that, because we're lawyers, we have to document that and have teeth, and we do in here. But what's different here is you have this fifth-generation company that's putting everything on this site, right, at the back of the site. So the front door is everything people are going to pass. And you know, if they don't do what they say they're going to do here, there's going to be there are teeth that sink very, very, very deeply. And so the difference here is you have and I should add, and you all know this probably from reading the memorandum about the development agreement, is if Scavuzzo's ever didn't, because the premise and what I just said was Scavuzzo's are putting everything on this site, right? That's their company, that's their headquarters, that's their flag nationally. Well, what happens if Scavuzzo's change that? What if Scavuzzo's went across to Missouri or somewhere else? This whole thing blows up. So again, they said, that's fine, because this is our home, this is where we want to be for the next, whatever, multiple generations. So in sum, while this is important that the legal teeth are here, and they are, you also have a very unique situation, not your normal developer, that says everything goes away if I'm ever not planted here with my family business on the south side. And as long as I'm planted there, I'm not going to let not desirable looking or uses go on this site. So it's different. It's a different deal.
Scavuzzo's development is an LLC, though, correct?
Scavuzzo's Inc. is a corporation which employs all the employees and such, but as we do, and you know this, I know, but for this project, we form an LLC that's owned by them for liability reasons and things like that. So yes, sir.
And the property was taken under eminent domain, if I remember correctly, by the city.
That's right.
And so I do remember the business that was there that was impacted by the eminent domain taking of the unified government. I just want to, having not had an opportunity to visit with the Scavuzzos directly, I want to thank them for their interest in our community. I truly do. And I do hope that this ongoing development agreement will come to fruition to the extent that the Scavuzzo family can look back at Wyandotte County and we can look at them as partners 25 years from now and see the great work that we put into the foregoing effort that we're doing this evening, so that we can have long-term viability and an opportunity to reinvent and reinvest in an area of our community that's been crying out for jobs and additional, I call it leisure-tainment opportunities, whether it be a restaurant. But I'm really excited about a corporate headquarters in our community. I know on the state level, I'd like to see an incentive for corporate headquarters that would allow corporate headquarters that want to establish in communities additional incentive be available. Unfortunately, that's not here today. I do know that in this contract, it does discuss eminent domain proceedings that could occur. So I think that allows the unified government additional teeth, as you just stated. So with that, That's all the comments I have, but I just want to thank the Scavuzzo family, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Scavuzzo family. I do want to welcome you to Wyandotte County, and I sincerely want to thank you for your patience and investment in our community. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. I know that it's late and that we yet have more work to do, but I want to echo Commissioner Burrow's comments, and we are excited about what could happen at this property with the Scavuzzo family. There's no question about it, and I don't want there to be any question about it. It's probably incumbent on me that I never reached out to you or any of the Scavuzzo family for a one-on-one meeting. I'm sitting in at this committee. This is not the committee I sit on. So this is all news to me, which I have to say as the at-large commissioner of this district is a little bit concerning. So I'm going to make it a point to ask each and every one of you for a personal meeting so that I can have the details of what you've brought forward. It's all brand new to my eyes, unfortunately. That would be fine on any other day, but today I'm a voter on this committee. And right now, because of everything I just said, I'm going to make a motion that we table this at least 1 month for further discussion, further exploration, further understanding of what's in these documents.
Second.
Been a motion and a second.
Can I ask for a clarification? Is that just for the resolution for the development agreement?
I beg your pardon?
Is that just, so there are 3 different items?
Well, on this item.
So on
I've asked
the development
table the
agreement?
item for a month, and that may pertain to the items 2 and 3 behind it, I don't know.
Okay.
Right.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I would only say that procedurally, there are some moves that we probably should make tonight to keep the thing moving forward. I agree with Catherine, if the concerns are about the structure of the deal and the development agreement, I think it would be just fine, obviously, to table. You can do whatever you want, but I think Kurt and the Scavuzzos would probably ask if we could preserve the procedural calendar on some of these other things. As you know, with TIF, you've got to give notices, you've got to set hearings, and I think they might ask you if we could continue to keep that procedural stuff alive tonight and continue to talk about the development agreement. That might be their preference, strong preference.
Because we already have, the project is, and again, this is part of the process, but it's held up until, even on this schedule, till the end of August. And so, as Todd said, the development agreement wasn't even get voted on this schedule until later in August. But what would be wonderful is that these other items, as Todd said, would allow us to at least move towards calling a public hearing at the end of this month, to have a hearing at the end of August, if you know what I mean, with the discussion, plenty of discussion between now and then.
Procedural items are items 8 and 9 on this agenda, correct?
That's right.
That is
Not
correct.
this,
And
right?
we are only voting right now on number 7.
Got it.
That's right.
And what I would say is, in seconding this, I want this to be wildly successful. 2, I recognize the enormous investment that the Scavuzzo family is making in this project. But 3, because it is a public-private partnership, we are similarly making a big investment in this project. And I think it's incumbent on us to just take a breath and slow down and thoughtfully consider all of the aspects of this deal and come back in a month's time, much better prepared to have a productive discussion and take a productive vote. So I second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any other comments? Commissioner Townsend?
A third isn't required, but I'd like to echo the comments from my other commissioners. And also, I don't want the Scavuzzo family to think anything that was asked by me is done so out of anything other than my obligation to the people I represent, and as a UG commissioner. This has been a challenging site, wanted to succeed, but I would appreciate the time to better understand and possibly come up with some more questions and then deal with it in a more knowledgeable perspective in another month. Thank you.
At this time, I would ask, is there anybody from the public that would care to comment on this particular issue? You have 3 minutes. If you approach the microphone and state your name and address, please.
My name is Michelle Franks. My address is 3936 North 108th Terrace, Kansas City, Kansas, 66109. I guess the concern as a consumer and a person who's paying property taxes, could they not even just pay the property tax that you would assess me on 50 acres of land? I mean, I'm not trying to be funny. $400 from a person who's paying $6,000 for a little bitty piece of land that a house is on. I understand I have a house on there, but I'm just saying the property value for, I mean, if the word got out, you sold 50 acres of land in prime area, you've sold, because I've gone to the auctions, I've gone to the land bank auctions, you've sold land inner city that was vacant for much more than you're selling this. It just seems like unbelievable that you could get land on State Avenue for $400. So that, I guess as a consumer, that would be my concern. Because would the property value increase? Would they be, if you started at 400, once they get the property, the structure built, are you going to assess them the appropriate property tax based on not just the revenues from the sales tax, but actually the assessment, will it go up?
That's usually the process. Once a project is finished, it's not any different than a home being built under construction. It's appraised at its original, the value of the purchase of the property, and then the value goes up as the project is completed. There's a whole new reassessment, and I believe that is correct. If it's not, staff, please correct me.
Okay, I just want to know, because it says something about providing financing for it. So I'm thinking, are we going to finance some more property tax after we give them the land? I'm just kind of confused.
Commissioner, what you said is exactly right. In fact, the whole underpinning of the TIF is reliant on those tax values going up. It's that increment that really pays for the TIF.
That was just my question. I just wanted to know why it was just so cheap. I mean, that was like unbelievable.
Well, I would just add one thing, and so part of the reason that, this is part of the incentive is the land value, and one of the things we're getting out of this not only are the amenities, but also $150 million of
Well, it's
investment.
estimated $140 million,
Yeah.
right?
So it's not it's hard to do kind of an apples to apples comparison, but.
And the UG, the last little bit that there's so much to talk about, but this is a relevant piece, is if the development doesn't happen on any given piece as promised, the UG gets to take it back.
Right.
That's something we didn't mention, but it's important.
Motion's been made and seconded to table item number 7, the agreement with the KC Foodie Logistics Center. I'd ask the clerk call roll.
Roll call. Bryant?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
The next item is the ordinance that is solely terminating the 2007 Midtown TIF project plan that never came to fruition.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Before I take action, does anyone from the public wish to address this item? Let it be known nobody step forward. Okay. At this time, it's an action item. I'd ask clerk call roll.
Roll call. Bryant?
Aye.
Walters?
Aye.
Bynum?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye.
And the final item is a resolution setting a public hearing date for August 29th to consider the new project area plan for a new TIF that is.
Move to approve as submitted.
Motion been made and seconded. Before we do that, I must again ask, does anybody from the public wish to address this item? Seeing none, we'll move. I'd ask the clerk, this is an action item. Please call roll.
Roll call. Bryant?
Aye.
Walters? Bynum?
Aye.
Townsend?
Aye.
McKiernan?
Aye.
Burrows.
Aye. That concludes the business of the Economic Development Finance Committee this evening. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for those in attendance.